On behalf of myself, Councillor Ray Wootton, Chairman, and Vice Chairman, Councillor Sarah Trotter, welcome to the Rural and Communities Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to welcome all officers and members to this meeting, and in particular, welcome to Councillor Ben Green, who is here for his first meeting today. So welcome. Ben, I hope you enjoy the committee meetings. If you wish to ask a question, please indicate to the Vice Chairman. This meeting will be recorded and the recordings retained in accordance with the Council's document retention policy. We now go to the agenda. Agenda item 1, comments from members of the public. I don't think we have any members of the public here today. So item 2, apologies for absence. Any apologies, Amy?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Annie Mason, and we also have Councillor Richard Cleaver, Councillor Linda Wootton and Councillor Sue Woolley in attendance as observers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Welcome to you all. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members who have any interest to declare? You can also declare them during the meeting. No, thank you. Item 4, action notes for the meeting held on the 17th of February 2022. I'm just going to go through them for accuracy only. Page 3, page 4. Yes, Councillor.
Under 48. Under 48, there's a list of bullet points there. I know the bullet points, but what, for instance, does the full tenant consultation had been undergoing imminently possibly mean?
You're quite right. That doesn't sound right at all, does it?
It's
Amy, can you recall that? I'll look back.
I am happy to revisit this and go back on the recording.
okay. Sorry about this. And there's another one. Landlord health and safety compliance triggering the regulatory involvement. I just don't know what that means either. So sorry about that.
No, that's right. Thank you. Right, we'll continue back to page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. Are we happy that it's a true record of a meeting held on the 17th of February? If so, do I have a proposer? Councillor Trotter proposed, seconder. Councillor Westrop, thank you. It's been proposed and seconded that they are a true record of minutes held on the 17th of February. Will you please vote all those in favour? You weren't here. Abstentions? Anything against? No, thank you, that's carried. So we'll now move on to item 5, updates on page 11. They've all been completed except for 2. The one, item 51, I will send once the agenda meeting has been published from the Lincolnshire Police and Crime Panel meeting, which is due to be held on the 10th of June. Same for that one. Are you all happy with that? Good. We will now, item 6, be sitting as the Crime and Disorder Committee, and I welcome today Chief Inspector Phil Vickers, Lincolnshire Police, to this meeting, and Yvonne Swinton, Community Safety Lead. Phil, welcome, and I understand you want to do your bit first so you can get away soon. So over to you, Phil.
Chair, thank you. I appreciate being invited to the meeting today. My proposal is that I've been asked to talk about some neighbourhood policing issues, PCSOs in South Kesteven, and antisocial behaviour. But Chair, with your agreement, I'll give a brief introduction as to who I am, why I'm here, and then perhaps the broader environment for policing in Lincolnshire.
That's fine, thank you.
Not only am I a Lincolnshire lad, I'm from Grantham, born here. My family still live here, and I have very strong links to the town. Secondary school was at King's, so this is very much my home. I've been a police officer in Lincolnshire for 25 years, predominantly working in uniform roles and mainly within community safety, the community safety arena. I hold a number of roles that I perform. However, my day job, if you like, is that I am responsible for operational policing across South Kesteven and the North Kesteven area. In addition to that day job, I have portfolios where I'm responsible for armed policing. I am the Force Rural Crime Lead, and I have some other command skills in terms of hostage and crisis negotiation and public order. So an experienced police officer, I guess, is the picture that I would want to present to you, and very much with my heart in South Kesteven. I think that what I would start off with in terms of painting a picture of rural community safety is that we are very fortunate to live and to work in one of the safest parts of the country. That Lincolnshire as a whole is a very safe place to live, to work and to visit. But clearly it is our responsibility to work together as two organisations and with other partners to make it safer. So from my perspective, success is prevention rather than enforcement and investigation. But inevitably, when offences have been committed or there's antisocial behaviour, there is a role that we need to perform after the event. But prevention should be our focus. So with that in mind, I'm going to put some really heavy caveats on any statistics and that you may see that relate to antisocial behaviour in particular, and to a lesser extent crime as they relate to the past 2 years and those that are during the relevant period for the pandemic, because the way that we have nationally been required to record antisocial behaviour is that where information is provided around a breach of COVID regulations, they should be recorded as antisocial behaviour rather than crime in themselves. Where offences are identified, are investigated, are prosecuted that were against the COVID regulations, they are recorded as crimes. But the vast majority of the COVID impact, if you like, is in terms of recording antisocial behaviour incidents. So in really basic terms, if someone phones in and says that they've seen their neighbour breaching the COVID regulations, then from a police perspective, we would record that as an antisocial behaviour incident. That's really relevant because it completely skews the statistics, the information that might be available to you, to us, and the way that we work around a bigger picture, a bigger number, if you like, around antisocial behaviour. So for Lincolnshire and in fact nationally, whilst crime has reduced during the pandemic period, and I'll come on to perhaps why that might be, a number of different reasons, antisocial behaviour has increased, but that doesn't cause me a concern in terms of keeping our community safe. The way that I would present this to you is that we focus on the issues, the crime types, the incident types, the people who have the greatest impact and who cause the greatest harm to our community. So that would explain why, for example, preventing murder is obviously a high priority for policing, but we might also recognise that those higher volume offences, so theft from shops, business crime, which are obviously a much higher volume of offence, are also relevant to us because of the harm across the community that kind of offence causes. With that in mind, I would say that crime reducing nationally and certainly in Lincolnshire has a lot to do with public space offences. So inevitably, whilst I suppose the most obvious end would be public houses and licensed premises, but actually a lot fewer people in public spaces has meant that public order offences, which are relatively speaking a volume crime for us, they reduced because there are fewer people, so there's fewer rub, if you like, of people coming against each other and in disagreement, and so we would expect to see the number of those public space offences reducing. Inevitably, the COVID regulations and some of the powers that came with them allowed us as a police force, and in fact yourselves as district council as a partner, to use enforcement and preventative activity in a different way. So, for example, if we look into our rural areas, we have in Lincolnshire, we're one of the top counties for hare coursing, for poaching. It is quite common for police officers at night and during the day, but at night in particular, to come across people who have travelled significant distances to poach in Lincolnshire. The COVID regulations allowed us to take preventative action. They shouldn't have been out at that time. Those are powers that the police don't normally have, but they came with COVID. And so we were able to enforce against them, or we were able to give them warnings. We were able to require them to leave the county. And so they were preventative powers that prevented further offences. If I presented that in a clear way, then it should be straightforward to understand then that we've had greater enforcement and prevention ability to reduce crime. Equally, if perhaps on a more traditional means, if we would talk about domestic and commercial burglaries, we have people who live in this town who are recidivist serial burglar offenders, and they might be out at 2 o'clock in the morning. We would find that suspicious. We would want to know what they were doing, but under normal circumstances, the police would have a relatively small number of powers that we can use against somebody who we just happen to see out at 2 o'clock in the morning, even if we all would recognise that they're likely to be up to no good. COVID powers gave us the ability to enforce against them for being out in a public place at that time, but also to take preventative action against them being out. The result being that you could reduce the number of suspicious people, people who were of interest, and in doing so, the risk to the local community, to the local business community, against those people who might be out and about with a view to committing crime. So COVID presented us with a number of challenges, clearly yourselves and from a policing perspective as well, but it gave us some opportunities. And I would say in Lincolnshire, we took those opportunities wholeheartedly. So we've seen crime reduce, we've seen antisocial behaviour increase, but with reason for that. That's why I would put a caveat on any statistics you might see that are relevant for that period, because you do need to drill down and understand the detail of that. It's also offered some other opportunities for partners, particularly when we look into the health arena. So where we've got criminal offenders who are motivated because of addiction, who are motivated because of particular requirements of their circumstances, it has allowed, beyond the policing family, in the broader community safety arena, for partners to provide a level of support to those individuals, and actually to do some really positive work around what ultimately has prevented crime, what ultimately has made South Kesteven a safer place. So I would say there are some silver linings to the cloud of the pandemic that's challenged us for the past couple of years. So to focus more tightly on policing issues, I'm not going to labour the point, but I will say that Lincolnshire is and has been the lowest funded police force in the country for a prolonged period of time. I think I should also balance that out by saying that whilst the force's funding is at the bottom end of the table nationally, actually our performance in terms of keeping our communities, our businesses, our visitors safe is traditionally and is still very much in the top half, and in many areas, and in the significant areas in terms of threat to life, if you like, we are in that top quartile. So we are a very safe place. We punch very much above our weight in terms of the funding that the force receives, and the performance, the way that we work together to keep our communities safe. For me, that feels like a little bit of a segue in terms of the work that we do with the District Council. And I, before coming here today, I considered what might be useful for you in terms of considerations and conversations. So there are a couple of things that I would want to bring to your attention. I say I've worked with all 7 of the district councils across the county. I was seconded into the county council community safety team for 2.5 years as well. So I think I have a good insight into the different organisations. I recognise that from an elected member's perspective and from a council officer's point of view, organisations change and develop over time. But I have worked with all of the district councils in Lincolnshire and in fact beyond in a number of cases. So I offered you this as my perspective. There are some things that I think that South Kesteven does exceptionally well. And I will start off by saying the Cctv. So I think of Cctv in two ways. First of all, the technical ability, how clear is the picture, and the way that the cameras are distributed, and the basic, if you like, the infrastructure that you have available. And the second part is about your operators, your team that work most closely with us. And I will say to you, as I would say to anybody, that South Kesteven Cctv team is the best in the county. That you have a technical ability, and I think it's fair to say that the different districts leapfrog each other as the technology gets upgraded and develops, but you have a technical ability, but more pertinently, the staff that you've got working in that team are exceptional. They have an understanding of what we can do together as a district council and as police and other partners, but the two organisations most obviously, to keep our communities safe. I think that the level of exchange of information, of briefing, is good, and inevitably communication, whenever we look at what are we doing well, what are we doing poorly, communication is always a key theme. And in the arena of CCTV, I think that South Kesteven stands head and shoulders in this county. So I would want to say thank you, firstly, for your investment in that technology, in that team, and to provide some recognition for the work that they do. I will tell you now that when one of your CCTV operators calls up to the police officers, the police control room, to say there is something of interest, we listen, because they do know what is of interest. They understand what our capability is. They understand what is of significance in the area at this time, and it works really, really well. So thank you. There is a balance, and I'm going to really emphasize this because it's really important to me that you don't go away with the wrong impression, but I need to give you something where I think that South Kesteven as a district council potentially has room to develop and to make this community safer. So my observation would be around antisocial behaviour. This is not to say that South Kesteven is poor. I'll keep on emphasising this part, but it is an opportunity to develop. So there are two areas, perhaps, that in antisocial behaviour I would signpost you towards consideration for the future around working arrangements and investment. And that they link into antisocial behaviour. So I have the good fortune to have that operational responsibility across North and South Kesteven. So it means on a daily basis, I compare the two, the arrangements that we have for working with the two district councils. And it is my observation that in terms of antisocial behaviour for North Kesteven, they are a district council who are more proactive in the use of if I say coercive powers, I mean that in a very light way, but in the use of legal powers that are available to them as a district council to make our community safer. That is whether that's in the housing teams or whether that is just simply a culture in North Kesteven that is different to South Kesteven, and I think is an opportunity for this area to develop. Again, I reinforce, I'm not saying that you're poor, I'm looking for opportunities and trying to be the critical friend to make this a safer community. So my observation would be that if I was to compare North and South Kesteven, North Kesteven are more proactive in use of community protection warnings, community protection notices, legal powers that you have the ability to utilise and which I think North Kesteven use to good effect. I would, as a critical friend, as a partner of this council, and with a clear interest in making this community safer, I would push you in the direction of considering more proactive use of those legal powers and the opportunities that they present to protect the wider community. The second area is in use of eSINs. So if you don't know it, eSINs is a case management computer system. It is in use across the county, across each of the district councils, and South Kesteven is not an effectively, that's not the right word, my apologies, is not a proactive user of the eSIN system in the way that, for example, North Kesteven are. Now, again, I am going to keep laying this on quite thick. I am not saying that South Kesteven are poor. I'm saying this is an opportunity. This is an area where I would see that there is an opportunity to develop. The reason that I mention eSINs as a case management system and proactive use of it is that as I've worked with the other partners and district councils across the county, what I have seen is that those partners who are most proactive in use of that case management system mean that those are the partners where we as police and the other partners who have an interest in whatever that case may be, proactively and rapidly and in a timely manner share information about a particular case. So that may be a particular household, it may be a particular individual, it may be a broader area of public space, whatever that may be. Where that happens, where all of the partners buy in and use that, communication is really effective, it's timely, and in doing so, we are able to stop antisocial behaviour from progressing at an earlier stage, and in doing so, we make the community safer. Chair, I'm just going to take a pause. Have I put that in reasonable terms, and does that make sense as the way I've presented?
Thank you, Chief Inspector. It's good to hear that we are a safe area. Could I ask you to perhaps elaborate a bit on the south of the county, Stamford area, Bourne area? What is crime like and social behaviour like in that area down there? Thank you.
Okay, so there are distinct differences. I think that Stamford, I'll start off with and say that there is a huge impact on Stamford from two factors. The first one is the A1, and the second one is the proximity to Peterborough, as in fairness to some extent Bourne and the Deepings do, but more so with Stamford as a location of choice for Peterborough and surrounding area residents to come to socialise. So I think as we've come out of the pandemic restrictions, what we're seeing more and more of is around licensed premises, and social behaviour and crime that's linked to those licensed premises, public places, public spaces, and it does come. The offenders, the people who we are enforcing against in Stamford are by volume predominantly coming from the Peterborough and surrounding areas. The second crime area is the A1, and this has not changed. We saw a reduction during the pandemic period, but historically we are seeing offenders from all over the country who use the A1 will come off at Stamford, will cause typically overnight a short crime series, so they will go into perhaps a particular housing estate, sometimes as tight as a single street, and cause a number of offences, whether that be theft from motor vehicle, theft of motor vehicle, and sometimes burglary, sometimes commercial offences against commercial premises. But that's quite a unique characteristic for Stamford that isn't quite the same for Bourne or for the Deepings, to be fair. In terms of antisocial behaviour, I don't think that there's anything of great note. I suppose for Stamford, I would highlight the meadows and as an area. It's really difficult because when you've got a successful and vibrant public space, inevitably at the periphery, you've got elements of antisocial behaviour, you've got elements of criminality, public space criminality, public order offences. So it's really difficult because by being successful, I think on the periphery you get this kind of offending. So I have to say there is nothing in terms of a broader community safety issue that I would want to raise for your concern in Stamford, Bourne and the Deepings. If I can offer you something of use, it would be twofold. It would be the impact of particularly the Peterborough drug scene on the Deepings, Market Deeping and Bourne. We do see drug use in Stamford inevitably around the licensed premises, but the influence of criminality that's linked into the Peterborough drug scene, if you like, impacts on the Deepings and Bourne probably more than anywhere else. What I mean by that is those Peterborough offenders who are committing crime in order to fund their drug habit, their offending spreads out into Bourne and Deepings more than it does so for Stamford. And we are seeing that as we enforce. We clearly work closely with Cambridgeshire Police, the policing team in Peterborough, around that, understanding who they are and what have you. But we do see that element of criminality coming out there. The second area is relevant for the whole county, to be perfectly honest to you, and is very much at the forefront of my mind, which is about domestic abuse. I had the pleasure of online offering a presentation to the council in Bourne, and we talked about PCSOs and public space enforcement and a visible presence, if you like, of policing in Bourne. And I offer you the view that in terms of harm, the greatest risk to a resident in South Kesteven of them being killed, of them losing their life, is as a result of a domestic abuse incident. That the chances of you being killed by somebody who you don't know, of a stranger, is infinitesimally small. The chance of you being murdered by somebody you are in a relationship with is significantly higher. And from a policing perspective and partners and the work that's done, our emphasis, our focus is on identifying those potential future victims, those probably more pertinently, those potential future offenders, and preventing that for the future. And long may that continue, because our learning over many years has been that if not predictable, then the risk factors are certainly visible, are certainly known to the partners in one way or another. So I would absolutely bring to the fore the emphasis around that focus on domestic abuse and preventing that. Probably one final thing, given that I was prompted to talk about PCSO numbers. PCSOs are still very much the eyes and ears of policing in the local community, of bringing communities together, working with partners on the ground. As it stands at the moment, across South Kesteven, the number of PCSOs who should be allocated to this area, we are actually running about 7 PCSOs light of that. That has to do with a number of funding issues and various other things historically. But it is a real challenge from a policing perspective in terms of us delivering the service that we would want to. For example, the mini police, we work with particularly the primary schools to deliver that, but we are running light on our PCSOs. We are recruiting PCSOs currently with a view to them starting in October. There is a long delay from recruitment to them becoming effective, as there is with police officers, because of the training that's involved in that. It is a policing issue, but clearly it has an impact on yourselves as partners and as a broader community. And that is one of the challenges that we have at the moment. I anticipate that will be addressed by October. As it stands at the moment, we're prioritising the work that we do. Inevitably, I say with the secondary school, with the primary schools around mini police, we focus on those young people. We focus on that antisocial behaviour. But in terms of our capacity as an organisation in South Kesteven, that's a challenge for us at the moment.
Thank you very much. Could you please elaborate about the neighbourhood policing team system at the moment? Because years ago, there was perhaps an area that had 4 PCSOs on there, and it's reduced down now to a beat manager, nobody else. So is that going to be addressed soon, or is it going to be low forever? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we've started to address it. So we've moved some of the PCSOs around the county. That's not always straightforward. And in fact, in fairness, it's not always desirable, because communities value the continuity, a trusted face, the continuity of knowing who their local PCSO is, and building up relationships. So the force has benefited from the national uplift in the number of police officers. One of the commitments that the PCC, Mark Jones and the Chief Constable have made is into community and neighbourhood policing. We are currently recruiting to additional beat manager for the rural area surrounding Grantham. What that will mean is more dedicated police officers responsible for the problem solving, working with the district around that, and that will continue. The plan is that we will continue to expand that neighbourhood commitment. In line with many forces, but certainly Lincolnshire, from a high point in around 2010, when we had around about 1,200 officers, we have over that past 12 years or so reduced down. I think at our lowest point we were under 1,100. We were 1,000 and something officers. We are now back up to, as of the 31st of March, 1,205 full-time police officers in the force. A number of those are still within their first 2 years. A number of those are still within training. That is that long delay to get those operational resources out. But again, the commitments that have been made by the force, threefold, if you like. The first one is that neighbourhood policing commitment, which we're seeing the build-up of. The second one is a roads policing commitment, so a dedicated roads policing team. We are very fortunate that the first tranche intake of that is 12 officers based out of Grantham Police Station, albeit initially covering the whole county, but working from Grantham, which is to our benefit. We will have another team working out of Louth in July, and those skills dedicated to roads policing and travelling offenders, that's a benefit to Grantham, South Kesteven. And the third area is a rural crime team, and the force is recruiting experienced officers into a dedicated rural crime team, again covering the whole county, but with a focus on preventing crime in rural areas. So those are the three areas that the PCC has committed to, has funded, and the Chief Constable is delivering against now. So throughout this financial year, we will see the number of officers in those three particular areas increasing.
Thank you very much, indeed, Chief Inspector. All good news. I'm going to open up to questions from members of the team. Councillor Knowles, first question.
Thank you. Thank you for your thing, and we all thank the police and congratulate them on their successes. And we understand that the pool is funded and all the other things that go with that. And Lincolnshire is a relatively safe place. I speak coming from a Bourne Town Council meeting on Tuesday, and perhaps you've heard about it or heard. We've had a lot of offences in the town in the last week or two or 3 weeks: break-ins, vandalism, thefts, a knifing, I understand as well. In the town. So a lot of those things, it's come to the head again. 12 months ago, last time you came here, I brought up this about PCSOs. I brought them up again subsequently. They don't seem to have filtered through to Bourne yet. We got down to none at one stage when Graham left, you perhaps not Graham, and we got down to none. I believe we've got one in training now. That's it again. And it's this lack. Every one of the town councillors was up in arms in a big way, even more than me, and I'm fairly vocal on this, in a big way, that the lack of police presence in the town adds to the problems that allow these sort of antisocial behaviours and so on to happen. You know, you've talked about Bourne perhaps not having some of the problems that other people have, but we're beginning to get them. And the drug issue, we believe, is very grave. Everybody in town can tell you where drugs are being swapped, where they're being smoked, whatever they do with them, I don't know. But where they are, they can identify places where deliveries are taking place and so on. And everybody in Bourne is frustrated that nothing appears to be done about it. You came to Bourne, as you say, and you said that the prevention of death, particularly in domestic circumstances and so on, was a top priority. And we don't contradict you on that, but the bringing up of mostly the younger people of town to respect, to understand, to see police, to understand them, to respect them, and to respect the law about it, seems to be disappearing out of Bourne. And this isn't just a view of Philip Knowles. We've got two other councillors from Bourne here. I'm sure they would, and they're both written to the police commissioner and to the police force again, expressing their dismay. The council's now written, it's copied it to the MP and so on. We do feel that nothing has moved in the last 12, 18 months. And yet 12, 18 months ago, you sat there and said the focus on neighbourhood policing was increasing because of a new chief constable. And we don't seem to have happened in Bourne, because I know we're to the south of the county and we're not close to Lincoln or whatever else, or even Grantham. You've just said that a lot more policemen are coming to Grantham. Very good for Grantham. Doesn't help us in Bourne. And the feeling in Bourne amongst councillors, amongst anybody have anything to do with the thing, is that we are neglected when it comes to police. And the answer always comes back, well, we don't have a lot of crime. Therefore, you don't need a lot of management. We will start getting more crime, as we're showing now, because there is no police presence in the town, and lack of police presence will lead to misbehaviour and other things happening in the town. The neighbourhood watch was taken away. I was the coordinator, as I think I've said before. It just works off of social media now. Well, I don't work off social. I don't do social media. I won't work off there. And all my clients, I can't even call a meeting of the neighbourhood watch because the information lies with the police. I'm not allowed that information for obvious good reasons, who are neighbourhood watch and who aren't. But I can't call a meeting because there's nobody to call the meeting. It used to be done through Graham, and now we can't call a meeting in the neighbourhood watch. We don't have access to the file who is on it. So the thing doesn't seem to have moved on a lot in the last 12 months. And that is disappointment to many, many people in Bourne. And I'm just one of those people. Sad to say that is the experience in Bourne. We do congratulate, we do understand that resources are limited. We do understand that poorly funded police force, and we are not heavy crime. But in the last few weeks, it's gone berserk in Bourne for some strange reason. Somebody apparently has been arrested for some of those crimes, but it doesn't explain all of them. And when we get to a knifing and we get to charity places being constantly broken into, stuff being stolen from them, then the community has to get together to replace that stuff, which it has done. The Don't Lose Hope was broken into, as well as the Butterfield Centre on 2 occasions, and so on, shops and whatever. And that uneasiness spreads throughout the thing. And by repute, there are gangs of youths wandering around, sometimes with weapons, often with drugs, and often with drink. They are beginning to frighten some residents in Bourne. That I know some residents who would not go to a particular part of the town. Now, I know compared with big cities, big towns, other places, are a minor thing, but the feeling in Bourne is that we are just at the end of our tether because we do not have any policing in Bourne at all. Having said that, last week I was in Bourne, there were about 14 cars there all at one time because there's a couple of things happened. After we complained, all of a sudden we have an influx of cars come through, and I think there were specific reasons for that. But the generality is that Bourne feels neglected and not less safe than you would want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. Chief Inspector.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't disagree with that. I guess my point in response would be that balance between keeping the local community safe versus the community feeling safe. And I don't denigrate the importance of a community feeling safe. That our focus is on both things, but inevitably with what actually makes the difference, what actually prevents harm to the local community. In terms of an increase in resources to Grantham not having an impact on Bourne, I disagree. The roads policing team who are based here spend a significant amount of time in Bourne because the technology allows me to see where they are. There is a balance between, you can have a debate all day long about whether you want that overt policing, marked police vehicle presence, or whether you want us to use the unmarked vehicles for enforcement on roads policing. Predominantly, we're using unmarked vehicles at the moment and using that to good effect. I think probably in terms of, as you indicated, an increase most recently. The most significant crime issue for Bourne that I would highlight within the past couple of months would be commercial burglaries, which you talked about. We had a local man arrested earlier this week. He was charged, remanded, went to court, has pleaded guilty, and is currently on remand for those offences. His circumstances are they're probably quite unique. It's not a regular one by any means, but he was somebody who would commit commercial burglaries whilst drunk. So he had an alcohol issue, and as a result would come out into the town in the early hours of the morning and would commit those commercial burglaries. He has admitted those, and they are in hand. My focus in terms of our operational response to that has not been about PCSOs, although I do appreciate the value in engaging with the community and talking about and reassuring the community that we are dealing with those things that are important. I absolutely agree with you around the issue about Neighbourhood Watch. I think that was a significant loss. To put it in context, As this police force reduced our capacity, the number of officers, the number of staff that we had available to us over that past 12 years, and we are now building back up again. In 2019, whilst working here in this role, I lost 2 inspector posts and 5 sergeants. That was a significant impact on my ability to effectively police South Kesteven. But it was necessary in terms of the policing budget and reducing the officer numbers that we had available. As part of those savings, one of the decisions that the force made was to reduce the staff who were dedicated to support Neighbourhood Watch. I think that was a huge loss. I'm not saying it was the wrong decision in itself. I think that it was a huge loss in terms of our ability to deal with. But I think across the public sector and across other community organisations, we've seen that belt tightening over that period. What I would like to see for the future is something to replace that, because I think that community engagement pays dividends short and long term. What I will say in terms of everybody knows where the drugs are being dealt is they're not telling us. That information is not coming through to the police. I do see the information intelligence that comes into us either through a number of different sources, certainly that's provided to us anonymously by Crime Stoppers, for example. And I would encourage you and the community to use whatever means you feel most comfortable in providing that information, and we do respond. So the first thing that I'm usually required to do by law is to corroborate information intelligence. That's not difficult to do. That if you say that somebody is carrying, transporting, dealing drugs, controlled substances, then I can usually do something about corroborating that information relatively quickly, and likewise to enforce. So there's no lack of appetite around that. If there is a gap, and Neighbourhood Watch is a good example of that communication barrier, then I'd encourage you and the community to use Crime Stoppers. Is a really easy way of doing things. It can be provided anonymously. We respond, we react, we deal with that. The reason that Neighbourhood Watch, I think, is such a loss is that that's our opportunity to say, we receive this information through Crime Stoppers. We've been able to enforce, we've been able to work with a social housing provider for a closure notice, for example. That refers back to the use of powers to make the community safer. I think that there is that balance between the overt policing presence and doing the things that make local communities safe. And it continues to be a challenge. I don't disagree with anything that was said.
Thank you very much. If it's quick, thank you.
Just on this reporting of drug offences, I'm actually chairman of Bourne United Charities. We have the Red Hall building, which you perhaps know, and we have a CCTV camera in the hallway, and we've taken pictures and sent them to the police of drug offences taking place there. Apparently drugs being sold, and the top and bottom of it, there are apparently drugs being sold, so you can do little or nothing about it. I actually reported a drug transaction myself, seen by 20 or other 30 people, reported it as soon as I could. Again, I got the message back eventually that we know who it was, but we couldn't do anything because we couldn't prove that they were transacting drugs, and they would have to grant them and be analysed for 3 weeks before they came back to be decided as drugs. So it really was no way of doing anything about it at the time. Now, these were a little while ago and so on, but certainly when you've got CCTV cameras, the people exchanging goods were looking up at them, almost waving, not quite waving at it, but they knew cameras were there. We knew we were reporting it to the police, but it still went on. I think it's moved into the field at the back now and onto the wellhead, but even so, it's perhaps people have stopped reporting it because it appears that nothing is done. Sorry about that.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I think that's absolutely fair comment. Again, I think from a professional policing point of view, my observation would be the difference between being able to enforce for a single offence of a possession of a controlled drug versus frankly, a greater investment from a policing point of view, but a more effective way of keeping the community safe around dealing with drug supply. So what happens on a particular Wednesday afternoon, it's not to say it's not important, because clearly it is, but actually it's part of building up that bigger picture and understanding what the threat to the local community looks like. And I say, certainly for Bourne and the Deepings, the drug environment is built around particularly the Peterborough supply. There's one thing I'm going to challenge, and I know that I did challenge it at the town council meeting, and forgive me, don't be offended, but I look around the room at the age profile of all of us present, and I feel really uncomfortable. I squirm in my chair when perhaps an older generation make observations about a younger generation. And so this is not about your particular comment, but I always have to challenge this. The young people that we come into contact are, frankly, far more intelligent, far more articulate, far more capable than perhaps my generation were. I'm going to argue probably yours as well, but certainly my generation. The young people that we meet, in the vast majority, are very good, upstanding people, no matter what they may wear and how intimidated we may feel. I have 3 children of my own, and I recognise how they may look and behave on occasion. But the vast majority of young people that we come across give you great hope for the community for the future. And that communication issue comes again about perhaps an older generation understanding the challenges of a younger generation. When we look at what our young people face. The example that I gave at the council, and I will give again here, is I think the greatest risk to our juvenile population in Lincolnshire is the mobile phone that they all carry with them. The predatory behaviour that we see, whether it's through social media or online more broadly, the risk to them is far, far greater through that mobile phone that they carry with them. My daughter, age 16, my wife asked, where is there in Lincolnshire that she should not go? Where's the dangerous places? What are the streets she shouldn't go down? There isn't anywhere. I wouldn't want my daughter to be out at 2 o'clock in the morning particularly, but if she were, there isn't anywhere. There isn't anywhere in Lincolnshire that I think is a risk for her to be. That's the safe place. You travel 35, 40 miles down the road into Nottingham, that is not the case. You do the same into Peterborough, that is not the case. But there is nowhere in Lincolnshire that is unsafe for a young person or an older person to be at any time of the day or night. Whether they feel safe, that's a different issue, I recognise that. So that is the measure, if you like, of I think the safeness of this environment. I'd encourage you to talk to and listen to the needs of the younger generation, because they never cease to impress. And whilst the local press and whilst some enforcement may emphasise the police enforcement activity against young people, I never cease to be impressed by the people that we do meet. They are impressive.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Inspector. Have you got time for some more questions? I know you have to leave soon.
Yes, I do. My phone hasn't rung all my radio, so I'm safe.
Couple more then. Next speaker is Councillor Sarah Trotter.
Thank you, Chief Inspector. Some really interesting and good to hear you in person. Thank you. And certainly, I think as a council, take on board your comments about ESINs and the community protection notices. It's really good place to mention it because it's obviously a scrutiny committee. So we want to question and get better, definitely to help you, because you're obviously, understaffed and working really hard, and I'm very much appreciated as a resident. Just a little ask if we can improve, obviously, on those factors. I cover quite a lot of parish councils in my ward, and I do appreciate that you're really light on PCSOs. But all I would ask is maybe once a year going forward, we could have a representative at the parish council meetings. Because people do like to be reassured. They like to know what's going on. They like to know what they should do, especially with rural crime, which is a problem. I just think if you could, an officer take a time just to come to the odd parish council meeting, I know it'd be 100% appreciated. It did happen. I mean, I'm 3 years in, and the first year we had Stuart Bowden, who understands on light duties, and he was great. He's great, and we understand. But if that going forward, if that could be improved, thank you.
Councillor, thank you. I think probably just to put it in context, then, as it stands on the 31st of March, we had 80 PCSOs across the county. Our intention would be that we bring our total number of PCSOs in October up to 85. That's the number that are funded. At our peak, Lincolnshire had, I believe, 149 PCSOs. The PCSOs may be employed by us, but they're owned by the community. My observation and my push and my challenge back to parish councils, and you'll clearly know better than I do, but there are 500 plus parish councils across Lincolnshire, is my request would be that the PCSOs go to the parish council when there is an issue and when there is something specific that you want to address. And that can be difficult. I am not going to sit here and I'm not going to commit to PCSOs coming to parish councils once a year for the simple mathematical reason that if they are to do so, and when you look at the number of parishes that the PCSOs may cover, in fact, where there are clusters of parishes coming together and having cluster meetings, that tends to be really effective use of everybody's time. That would be my observation. Whilst there is an element of reassurance to the parish council of the PCSO attending, there is obviously, they're not out in their community being the eyes and ears at the same time. So there's a balance to be had. We may employ them, but they're owned by you, and to make best use of that time. So I'm not going to make the commitment of once a year, but at the same time, make it worth a while for everybody to do that, and that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want you to exactly say yes once a year, but as you say, eyes and ears, it's amazing. You do get residents obviously going to the parish council meetings, and it just sometimes information just comes together at those meetings, certainly from my point of view. So I'd like to think from the police's point of view, and we will continue to I'll pass any information on, but yeah, it was just to once in a while see someone would be great. Been spoilt in the past, I think.
I agree.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Councillor Van der Wiele.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Inspector, for coming today. You said that the area that SKDC were sort of weakest in was the preventative and the proactive area. And then you talked about Stamford, which is where I'm the councillor for, and our particular concerns are related to people coming into the area. And I love the fact that Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights in Stamford are really vibrant and people come from all over. But for us as a community and for SKDC, we're having to be reactive. It's down to our amazing CCTV operators who are monitoring what's happening. I'm just wondering, in order to be more preventative and proactive, whether you would agree that it would be better to have a more visible police presence, particularly when we can't build up knowledge about the people who are committing the crimes. As you rightly say, they're coming into Stamford from Peterborough and surrounding villages. So I just wondered, a little plea from Stamford to help us be more preventative and proactive, whether we could have a more visible police presence, particularly on those nights, Thursday, Friday and Saturday, when Stamford is so alive. It's fantastic, but sometimes can seem a little lawless.
Thank you. I'd agree that Stamford has a fantastic atmosphere, and what we've seen coming out of the pandemic is quite positive and very useful. I mean, if we look at the nighttime economy as a whole, rather than just purely the policing, that official, that recognised, that uniformed presence does make a difference, and it does reduce the level of public space offending. But there's more to it. So if we look at the licensing arrangements, working with licensed premises, in Stamford, it's actually really, really strong, really positive that we've got responsible licensees acting in a way, for example, around preventing drug supply, using the technology, using the behaviours, using the challenging that occurs. That's good practice, and Stamford has taken that on board. But in terms of a presence in the town on a Friday and Saturday night, again, I'll commit to what we can reasonably achieve, but it's not just policing. So we do see that street pastors, that the third sector, that charities who are working as a recognised and reassuring presence works really well in other parts of the force and nationally. Equally, having door staff arrangements, the licensees I think are already there. That having responsible licensing in Stamford is already to a good standard. But door staff and other visible presence, I think that there are potentially things that we can work on. If I'm not going to be offensive, but I'm going to say policing can be a blunt tool. That if we think that policing is the only answer, then it simply isn't. And actually, if our focus is on prevention, it doesn't just have to be on enforcement. And there are a number of steps that can be taken. I would be gladly to work with the town council, continue to work with the town council in fairness, around the measures that can be taken in Stamford to make the nighttime economy a safer place to be. But I think you started from a really good position already. The risks from a policing perspective in Stamford on a Friday and Saturday night are drug related and Peterborough related. So yeah, I would continue to do that.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to take one more question now. It's from Councillor Ben Green. Councillor Green.
Well, firstly, thank you for everything that you're doing. Domestic heating oil prices have been significantly impacted by inflation recently. I think they've gone up perhaps maybe even 100% year on year. And so that oil has become a more prize value target by criminals. Firstly, have you seen an uplift in domestic heating oil theft? And can you recommend any preventative measures for my constituents that they could take perhaps to minimise their chances of being victims? Thank you.
Councillor Chair, thank you. This is a really niche question. So this is really complicated, and it's also been impacted on by the changes in the law and legislation around use of red diesel, about who can, who can't. What we've seen is quantities of stored red diesel coming onto the market because people can no longer legally use them. Businesses in particular can no longer legally use them. And so the impacts on the heating oil market have been quite complicated. To answer your question directly, we've not seen a significant increase in the number of thefts across Lincolnshire. I will say across the broader region there have been. But it's complicated. I would probably say that it's worth bearing in mind that the characteristic of this type of offence is that it appears on a typical year. It would appear to Lincolnshire Police that there are no heating oil thefts right up to the point where the weather turns cold, and then everybody turns the heating on or goes out to their store and suddenly finds that although they'd topped it up when the prices were cheaper, actually there's no heating oil left, and what do you know? There's a hole in the tank and somebody's stolen it. So actually the offending happens throughout the year and maybe during the summer. But in fact, they don't get reported to us until we get the first cold snap. In terms of preventative measures, yeah, there are things that can be done. I have to say that in terms of South Kesteven, the characteristic of red diesel theft is predominantly from HGVs at truck stops rather than from domestic or from businesses. But there are physical measures that can be taken, particularly by rural businesses, around CCTV, lighting, location of those tanks. I know that they're not cheap and easy by any stretch. There are also things that can be put in place around the security of the access points. We don't often see that tanks are punctured. We do see that access points are forced and that kind of thing. And there's a good range of commercial prevention measures that can be put in place there. But in terms of, is it a priority for me from rural crime? It's one that we are aware of. We talk to the NFU and the CLA about on a regular basis, but actually we've not seen that increase. I would contrast that with theft of horse boxes and trailers. For rural communities and for rural businesses, we are seeing a significant increase in theft of horse boxes and of flatbed trailers. Bear in mind that this is a public meeting. There are probably 3 active teams offending in this area currently. Those trailers are being stolen and are not leaving the country. They are being bought. There are people in this country who are buying trailers under suspicious circumstances, and it's a vicious circle. So I perhaps present a picture where Trailers are stolen from a rural business, you suddenly realise that the business relies on that absolutely, and you suddenly very much need a trailer in order to continue your commercial activities, and so you maybe don't ask the questions as to where you get the replacement trailer from, which is inevitably a stolen trailer, and so the only people who benefit from this are those that are involved in the theft. That is a greater risk, I would argue, to rural businesses and rural communities than heating oil at the moment. It may change as we see the international market changing and the challenges around that. But as it stands at the moment, my focus is on trailer and horsebox theft rather than red diesel.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Inspector. You can see we've been speaking now for about an hour, so our members are very passionate about where they live, their parish councils in South Stephen. I'm sure if you sat here for another hour, we would have plenty of questions for you. So may I, on behalf of the committee, thank you for attending today and also invite you again next year for further updates.
Chair, elected members, thank you very much for the invite. I will re-emphasise and say that South Stephen is a valued partner, that my observations around antisocial behaviour are not negative. I simply had to look for where are the opportunities to improve the community safety, and perhaps those were the two that I would highlight. So thank you very much for your invite. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to move over to Yvonne Swinton, Head of the Community Safety Lead, for her presentation. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I've put a small presentation together for you this afternoon, which Jordan's going to sort out for me on the big screen. So I'm the Community Safety Lead, and I'm responsible for the management of neighbourhoods and CCTV. And hopefully this afternoon it might give you some understanding of what happens within neighbourhoods and CCTV, alongside what Chief Inspector Vickers has already told you. Okay, so up there you can see our responsibilities, and as you can see they're quite varied. We don't just deal with what you might consider to be ASB. So we're a fairly small team considering the responsibilities that we actually deal with, and I think it's worth noting at this point that although I appreciate that we've been compared to NK in the actions that we take, it's really difficult. I know Lincolnshire Police operate pretty much the same throughout Lincolnshire, but as we all know, as districts, we all operate slightly differently. And I do know that the antisocial behaviour team at NK is set up very differently to the way we are. So it is difficult to make that comparison about what they do and what we do, because it's two completely different things. So as you can see there, we deal with a range of things. Some of it is antisocial behaviour as you would consider traditional antisocial behaviour, and some of it is what you might consider environmental crime. But obviously, as you can see, a lot of environmental crime is also considered antisocial behaviour. So everything on that list, apart from the parking enforcement within council-owned car parks at the bottom, which is another thing that the neighbourhoods team are also involved in. So we have a senior neighbourhoods officer. She investigates the serious ASB and environmental crime offences. And she's also one of the safeguarding leads as well. She assists with any safeguarding within the district. We've got 3 neighbourhoods officers. They all investigate ASB and environmental crime. We have a neighbourhoods assistant who is absolutely invaluable for taking on the high volume, low complexity work that we have, which prevents us ping-ponging around the district trying to get to things. And we've got an enforcement officer that deals with the car park enforcement, and we've got a technical support officer that supports us with any administrative needs. So crime and ASB, they are closely linked. Sorry, Jordan, you beat me to it. The crime and ASB, they are closely linked. Like I've said, it's very grey. We do work with the police habitually. We have done for years to try and combat things, any crime trends that are taking place. We work in close partnership with them. I don't think, considering the lack of police and the budget cuts across everywhere, I don't think that we could do the job that we do without us working in partnership. The neighbourhoods team, we do use all of the tools and powers that Chief Inspector Vickers was referring to, but it's also worth noting that I think he explained that they were council powers. They're not. They are actually, the police can also use them. They're not just significantly our powers. So they're quite able to use them as well as us. So on the environmental crime side of it, as I'm sure most of you appreciate, and certainly your constituents will, it impacts most people. At some point in their lives, there will have some impact of it, whether it be a noisy neighbour, smoky barbecue, fly tipping found on private land of which they then have to clear. There's always something that's happening. And we have started to work with the police on this. Normally, environmental crime such as that has been solely the remit of the council. We are now working more in partnership with them, with their rural crime action team, who are being invaluable, particularly with the fly tipping. So hopefully moving forward, we should be able to combat more of that. And we are now working as part of the environmental crime partnership. So we're no longer working in isolation. We've got all the districts and other partners throughout the county that are now working together on this to try and combat it, so that it's not a case of it not happening in South Kesteven, it's a case of it not happening within Lincolnshire. Okay, next slide. Okay, CCTV, yes, they are fantastic. They're absolutely brilliant what they do down there. They are renowned throughout the county as the best CCTV control room, which obviously, is testament to their abilities that we were recently able to get the 5-year compliance certificate from the Biometrics and Surveillance Commissioner, which basically means that he's happy that we are operating at the top level of what we should be operating at. All the legislation is being adhered to, and we are operating that control room as he would expect us to operate it. At the time, we were the only district or area within Lincolnshire to hold that certificate, and as far as I'm aware, we still are, which is absolutely brilliant. So CCTV covers a huge range of areas across the district. There are various cameras. We've got a total of 197 cameras throughout the district, and they are in Grantham, Bourne, Stamford, Market Deeping. We've got the St Peter's Hill cameras and the ones in the public realm for the cinema, the Guildhall Arts Centre. We've got Welham Street Car Park. We've got a whole wealth of cameras around the district, and they are operated 24/7, 365 days a year. Okay, so up there, I don't know whether you can see it very well, it's basically a table of our responsibilities, and I wanted to show you what perhaps the council would deal with and what the police would need to deal with. And I think it's just a really good example to look at, that even though obviously you can see the X in the boxes of who deals with what, it doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't assist the police, and it doesn't mean to say that they wouldn't assist with us on certain types of things, even though it says that it's our responsibility. I think the key to it is partnership working, and I think that is something that, we need to note that we do particularly well. So there's some examples of partnership working from the last year. Tackling ASB. ASB is always going to be an issue. I think since the phrase was coined in the late 90s, I think ASB, a lot of things now get put under the banner of ASB, whereas originally it would have been maybe a group of youths on a corner causing a disturbance. But we do use a raft of tools and powers to try and combat it. Joint visits, we regularly do those with the police and with colleagues within our housing department, and we do warning letters, closure orders. We work with the police once they use their dispersal powers. We've got PSPOs, and we also use criminal behaviour orders, and as well as those, there are Cpns, which Chief Inspector Vick has referred to, and injunctions, all of which we've used. Years ago, we used to have many joint agency meetings with the police. We don't have as many of them anymore, and that's because we've got eSINs. I'm not too sure what he was referring to, because we use eSINs for all of our ASB. What we don't use it for is the environmental crime part of it. So because the police aren't particularly interested in untidy gardens and things like that, or pests, they're interested in the actual ASB. So we use two different systems. I don't know whether that is done differently elsewhere. I don't think it is. But for all of our ASB that we need partner agency working on, everything is put onto eSINs. I attend the priority setting meetings, which happen quarterly, and I take some input from whatever we're experiencing to try and get the police to prioritise what we need them to prioritise. Councillor Annie Mason also attends that meeting. So we do try and put over as much as we can from our perspective what we would like the police to concentrate on if at all possible. But obviously, given their staffing levels, sometimes that can be difficult. Patrols, we do joint patrols. As Councillor Knowles was saying, Redhall in Bourne, we did lots of patrols around there last summer. Unfortunately, we can't sustain them, throughout the year. We can only really do it for a short period of time because we're quite a small team. But we will go out, we will challenge people, we will try and deter people. We don't tend to sit back and hide. We tend to go and up to people, introduce ourselves, find out what they're doing there. If we witness any ASB or any other crime taking place, we feed that back to the police. But the patrols last summer took place throughout the whole of the district. So the two operations there, so these are police operations, Oppindle and Malta. Oppindle was a huge success, and although the police were looking to deal with motor vehicle ASB, I think one of the best things that they actually got was the fact that we could issue fixed penalty notices for littering, which they can't do. So the biggest impact on the people that were gathering and causing a nuisance was the fact that they just received a fine for a littering offence, which is really useful for the police and for us. It was handy to have the police there as well, because obviously if people refuse their details, then they can be arrested for that offence. So I think it was a real, they dealt with many things that evening. There was lots of vehicle defects. I think possibly one vehicle got seized because it got no insurance, things like that. So there was many things that happen on the actual operation itself for that, which was a great success. At Malta, that helps us no end with our fly tipping. I think it's been put under the remit of the Rural Crime Action Team now, whereby we very often get vehicles reported to us that are involved in fly tipping, but we don't. It's the police that have to take some action on that for the vehicle, because we obviously don't have the ability to stop vehicles and speak to the drivers. So once we've given them the details, they put them on their AMPR system and the vehicles are stopped, and then we can identify who the owners or who the drivers of the vehicles are. The PSPOs that we've got throughout the district, we've got an alcohol one, and then we've got the dog PSPOs. The police are responsible for enforcing on the alcohol PSPO that we've got, but for the dog PSPOs, we've carried out patrols, particularly down in Market Deeping. But basically, we will go anywhere that anybody tells us there is a problem. We will put it on our patrol board and we will attend that area. We can't be there every day. We do try and fit it in with other tasks that we have in certain areas, but yeah, we do try and attend as often as we can. Safeguarding, yeah, it is our responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility, and we take that very seriously. Very often we have been to properties where maybe an untidy garden's been reported, but once you actually get to speak to the occupier, the untidy garden is the least of their problems. And we then start to safeguard them. The reports are put in, we work with other agencies, and we're very proud of the fact that actually one of the local GP surgeries, we have actually managed to get a GP to come out with us to speak to an occupier who was clearly not well. And they wouldn't seek that help themselves, so we took the doctor to them. And CCTV observations, we're asked countless times by the police. We get the information and they say to us, have you seen anything? And we observe if something is happening in wherever the cameras are that we believe is illegal, we observe it happening, and then we tell the police, or we respond to their information. Obviously, if it's a lengthy request or it's an official request that needs RIPA, that information the RIPA is applied for at court, so that we have that all in place, so it's all done correctly. But yeah, most importantly, so the person in Bourne that was arrested last week, that was as a result of a CCTV operator. he had actually broken into a premises and the operator located him elsewhere in Bourne. So yeah, that was an outstanding piece of work that operator did. Absolutely fantastic. Because obviously by the time the police arrived and they've got the sirens going and everything, they run off. And yeah, they were able to spot him on another camera in another area of Bourne and direct the police to him, which was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, we've obviously helped out with all sorts of things. We've had a firearms incident in Stamford that was dealt with last year. Please don't think that Stamford has firearms incidents all the time. It doesn't. But it was just one particular one-off incident. And like I say, burglary, high value thefts, and a lot of the time we are dealing with cannabis grows that are in different properties throughout the district. Jordan. Okay, so one thing I would agree with, next one. Yeah. One thing that I would agree with Chief Inspector Vickers on is that sometimes things are happening with your parishioners, but we don't know. We don't get told. Very often people are happy to discuss it between themselves, but they're not happy to contact anybody. The email addresses that are up there for neighbourhoods, anything to do with ASB, and even if you're not sure whether it's ASB, if you can send it through to us, if it's not us, we will get you to the right people that you need to speak to. Cctv, that is their generic email address. They can be contacted, and obviously my email address is underneath. And anybody who wishes to can telephone customer services and they will be put through to us. Okay.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Yvonne. I mean, you're right, CCTV. I remember the last figures I saw for the Met was that yearly 600 people were arrested through CCTV intervention. So it's really important tool to use. First speaker I've got is Councillor Manduila.
Thank you, Chair. And hello again, Yvonne, and thank you very much. I went with Councillor Cleaver a couple of weeks ago to visit Yvonne's domain, and we had a very informative session with, I think it was Kevin with you as well. And I can absolutely vouch for the setup there is incredible. I wish they had more officers because I think the work they do is incredibly demanding, and it's one operator in that space, you know, working away. And I think they have a very hard job to do, and I'm really impressed with what they achieve. And recently in Stamford, I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, there was a 3 a.m. property damage, which I found out about when I woke at 7 a.m. I managed to get in touch with the CCTV operator. He then managed to locate a perfect shot of the person who did it. I'm not sure where that is now, but I guess it's in the system, and hopefully someone will be arrested. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to ask about. One was on your list of staff, you mentioned there were 2 jobs that both had car park enforcement as part of their remits. Are they the only car park enforcers? Because for Stamford alone, there's 4 district car parks. And if there's only 2 people doing it for only part of their time and they're doing it across the whole district, it's amazing that any car park enforcement happens. As well as enforcing the actual legitimate car parks, there's also an issue in Stamford with the bus station that is at the moment being used as a car park. And because it's owned by SKDC, it can't be enforced by the police, and buses are struggling to come and park in their designated spaces. So that is a big issue. So I wanted to ask about what could be done there. And then the second thing was, I like the fact that you've got neighbourhood officers giving littering fines. And I was wondering whether it would be possible to put in a request on a sunny Saturday afternoon to come and walk Stamford Meadows with me, because it would be really useful to hand out a load of fines. There are repeat offenders there every weekend, and they know that the litter pickers in Stamford will come and pick up after them, but they shouldn't have to. So it would be really great to blitz it. So I would really like to put that into place if you can help with that, Yvonne. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Yvonne?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Car park enforcement. So we have one officer that does it full time. That's his full time role. We did used to have 2, but the other person moved into the neighbourhoods team. So we have one that does it full time, and we have one that fills in maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And then if the full time person is on holiday, he fills in and does the car park enforcement. They are really exceptional at what they do, and you might consider it to be a mundane job. They absolutely love what they do, and they are very committed to what they do, and they're absolutely fantastic ambassadors for the council, because they don't just get asked about car parks, they get asked about everything because they've got the council badge on. And they're brilliant, and they have done exceptionally well, and they issue as many parking tickets as they possibly can. What they have established since we took over the car park enforcement is they have a pattern of behaviour. So they know that if they go into a particular car park, that it will be a particular time of day that they will then achieve more tickets, because there's more people not paying at that time of day. So it's taken us quite a while to establish that. But what that does achieve is that although it may seem we haven't got many people actually giving out tickets, they are giving out the maximum that you could give out. And I think even if you had more, you probably wouldn't achieve any more, because they're giving as many as they can to the people who are obviously committing the offences of not paying for their parking. So yeah, I mean, they are absolutely brilliant at what they do. So I would say that what we have staffing wise at the moment is probably absolutely sufficient. With the bus station, yeah, it's not, although it's council owned, it's not on the car parking order. So I have asked for that to be looked at, because if the car parking order is reviewed and it is added to it, then there is potential that the car park enforcement officers can then go in there and enforce. Okay, and absolutely, if you want to spend a Saturday afternoon giving out littering fines, even I would be happy to come with you.
It's a date, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm conscious of time, although we have to have a crime disorder meeting at least once a year. I have a request from Councillor Richard Cleaver, who's not a member of this committee. I'm happy to ask a question if we, as members, are happy for him to do so. Yes, good, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and it's nice to meet you again. The Chief Inspector mentioned community protection orders and community protection warnings in relation to us doing fewer of them or using them less than North Kest even. Could you comment on that, please? I'd be interested to know for any officers here what their view on that is. You also noticed that you also mentioned 197 cameras, which sounds like a heck of a lot, but that includes some that are inside SKDC buildings. So of those 197, how many actually need to be monitored in real time, and how many, because they're internal, don't need to be? Just as a point of information. On the littering fines, what's the legal position with regard to who is authorised to actually issue them? I'd be interested to know if you could tell me that. And the Cctv at southkesteven.gov.uk email address, is that monitored 24/7? So if I put in an email to it in the middle of the night for whatever reason, that will be picked up straight away rather than me calling somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you. Let me deal with the email address first. Yes, it is monitored 24/7, but what I would say to you is please don't use it as instead of phoning the police or contacting the police. Because the response for some things, the response has to be a police response. And although it's quite handy for us to say, yes, we've got that on camera, or no, we haven't got any cameras there. I don't think you should stop calling the police when you need to call the police, because if the police aren't aware of what's happening, they can't do anything about it. And yeah, they need to, and particularly if it's a crime, they need to be told about it. So, but yes, it is monitored 24/7. But obviously, because we also operate the out of hours emergency number via CCTV, you may not get a response straight away. But yeah, if anybody who suffers insomnia, there is somebody there to chat to in the middle of the night, definitely. Okay, so with regards to the CPNs and CPWs, so they were brought in some legislation in 2014, and basically the CPW means a community protection warning. A community protection warning has to be issued before a community protection notice can be issued. They're very good powers. They are very good, and they are very useful. And 9 times out of 10, a community protection warning is sufficient to get the job the job done. Whatever you're trying to stop or make people do, it is sufficient to control that. You can't appeal a warning. A warning is a warning, whether they rip it up or they adhere to it, that is as it stands, that it can't be appealed. If they breach the warning, then you're looking at issuing a community protection notice. If they breach the notice, then you're looking at issuing fines and then taking them to court for the breaches. We have done that. We have taken people to court for breach of community protection notices. What we found was that the courts weren't particularly favourable, that they didn't see what we were taking to court was sufficient to be before a court. And so although the legislation is there and allows us to use it, sometimes the response that we get isn't exactly what it should be. However, we have persevered. We do issue CPN warnings and we do issue CPNs. I think it is probably fair to say, and like I've said, all districts operate differently. We probably don't issue as many as North Kesteven, but I would be interested to know how many of North Kesteven's actually get challenged. So it might be that they find that they work, and for their community it works, and it works with solving the issues that they've got. What we have found is that we have been challenged on several occasions regarding them. And what you've got to bear in mind is these are really strong powers to stop people from doing things. What you've got to be absolutely sure of is that it's not just annoying, it's not just something that gets on your nerves, it has to be a proper nuisance, and you have to evidence that. So yeah, they are used, we do use them, obviously not as much as the police would like us to, but like I've said, it's not just our powers. The police are quite able to issue their CPN warnings and CPN notices as well. So yeah, it's not just our legislation. But yes, we do issue them. Sorry, you had another question and it slipped from me. Littering fines.
So it was who can issue littering fines, and what percentage of the cameras don't need to be monitored because they're inside the buildings?
Okay, so the cameras that are constantly monitored is about 130. We have 62 internal cameras within council premises, and obviously we don't monitor those all of the time. If there is an issue, then we will. I think going back to our burglar from Bourne, it was as a result of him breaking into the Bourne cap, and it actually came up and we were able to find him on the cameras inside the property. So yeah, so we have about 130 that are monitored. Littering fines, it is only an authorised officer of the council that can issue littering fines.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Yvonne. On behalf of the committee, I thank you for coming today. It's been very interesting and enlightening, and also you've given the committee many things that we didn't know existed or happened. And could I invite you back in perhaps 6 months' time to give another presentation? Sorry, Councillor Knowles, I didn't realise, I didn't see your hand. Is it a quick one?
Very, very quick. Looking at the information they put up on here, the telephone number is 406080. Can I suggest you advertise yourself with another number, either a direct number or an email, a private phone or whatever, because 406080 is only open for a very short part of the day, and when it's open, you're very, very unlikely to get through to who you want to when you ring it. It's just waste of space.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you again, Yvonne. I'm now going to move back from the crime and disorder section of our committee back to the main agenda. So agenda item 7, which is a compliance update. Is it yourself, Craig, that's going to deal with this, or Andrew? Robert? Councillor Reid, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. I'm expecting 2 questions today. I'll be interested to see if we get them. I'm pleased to be able to introduce the progress report on our journey to the full recovery of compliance with the regulator of the social housing home standard. Firstly, I'd like to focus on the landlord health and safety issues. The good news, I hope, will be that when you look at your forward plan, Mr. Chairman, is that I am hoping that before September, we will be out of the regulators' concerns. We are working towards that expediently and hopefully before. The Council's Chief Executive and the Director of Housing and the new Assistant Director have continued with their monthly meetings with the regulator. And indeed, I and the leader continue to have our compliance meetings. Since these events were brought to us, the seriousness still continues. And we are on, we've just had meeting number 74. So we are still taking very great care of the situation and monitoring its improvement. The chart attached, as in the appendix to the report, shows changes within the performance and measures that we have to ensure these are moving towards high compliance percentages. Now, we continue to work with tenants who are not cooperating with us in relation to the servicing of gas compliances in their homes, but unfortunately have had to take legal action to obtain access to a small number of cases. I would like to also highlight for the committee that good practice suggests landlords should undertake a comprehensive stock condition survey every 5 years. This is coming to a conclusion of the current one, and we look forward to feeding back the outcomes and indeed, as we have spoken across the council, to the budgets that we will then be able to bring for you to also scrutinise for the short term, the medium, and indeed the long term. And the long term, I hope, will probably be a long time past me being around, but I am saying so because of the seriousness of where we've come from and how we need to use our stock condition surveys in the future to make sure that we never end with this enormous mammoth task of repairs to have to undertake and regulate. So that, and of course, this will form in the nature of a business plan moving forward. Time is not on our side. Compliance is something that is regular. I'm hoping that, as I've said, we're going to move out of the regulators' inspection, and so therefore I'm sincerely hoping that I will be reporting back to you on a responsible basis rather than as it currently is. And we've made it mandatory. Not quite there yet, but we're very nearly. So I have both the director and the assistant director with me this afternoon, and we'll take any questions if we may. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Before I move on, could you update the committee on how your tenants' involvement is going on?
Our tenants' involvement is progressing, as you are well aware. Chairman and members, we have had 2 workshops on that, and we are now following forward with that. And I will hand over to Andrew to just sort of give you an up-to-date, as of today's position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me, and good afternoon, everybody. So in relation to tenant involvement, Chairman, obviously that takes many forms, but we are moving forward on a very broad basis with tenant engagement. What's been really critical for us, of course, is our big listen survey that we refer to in the report that's in front of committee today, and that I believe we've reached a return rate of 25% in terms of that survey, which is excellent. We now need to do the analysis, and of course we'll be really pleased to bring that to a future committee meeting in terms of the outcome of that report, showing what tenants feel should be our priorities. We've launched, and the rant and rave system has gone live, which we've spoken about at this committee a number of times, and that's there's a snapshot appended to the report. We've also engaged in terms of individual communities within our tenant base. So there's an event at Riverside this afternoon. It's going on now with officers out engaging with tenants, getting their views. We've also got a couple of trades operatives there to do any immediate snagging or responsive repairs. And that's I think the second meeting at Riverside, and we've also rolled out different events at other schemes as well within the district. So hopefully that answers that question, Chairman. Happy to take any other questions on the figures, of course.
Yes, Andrew, if I could refer you to page 20, where you're talking about 12.84 of tenants responded. What do you mean? Tenants of a certain place, location, or of the panel?
No, that's right across our tenant base, Chairman. So out of our 6,000 tenants, 12.84 have responded, and that's now doubled in effect up to the 25%, which is, I have to say, having run this sort of survey before in other places, that is exceptionally high return rate. And that clearly we're very interested in the analysis of the results.
I was just going to say it's a good result to get that out. I'm up to questions now, and the first question is from Councillor Philip Nobles.
Thank you, Chair. I've three questions really. On page 20, page 8, 9, 20, 21, the electrical testing, 644, it says, where access has not been successful, and legal action will be taken in April. How many legal things have been issued so far? That's the first question. Second one, on page 22, 111.5, Legionella, it says that the remaining 8 are due to be completed by the end of April 2022. So has that been achieved? Have they been dealt with? And clearly, the next one is on this chart. 2 places have gone to red. With Legionella, 28 were compliant last report, and now the 31st of the 3rd, 28 are compliant. So that's no change and none gone forward. On the asbestos, 193 were compliant on the 18th of February, and sad to say that 6 weeks later, only 98 are compliant. It's a reduction of 95. And can you explain a little bit why that should be? There's a small explanation at the side, but it's not very detailed and doesn't tell us a great deal. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and happy to take those 3 questions roughly in order, but they do jump around a little bit. So yes, with electrical testing, up over 80% now. Obviously, that's the highest figure we've recorded, I think, ever, certainly since in my time here. We do have that around 10% of tenants where we're struggling with access, and there's a range of reasons for that. Underneath that, it could be COVID in the household. There could be some vulnerability. There may be other illness. There may just be a flat refusal to let us in. Anything on that sort of range. We have started the first steps with legal action. 3 notices have been served already. We're still working through. Clearly, we can't do those 600 tenants at once. All the housing officers have those on their patch. They're working through. They are achieving access in some cases, and where we've got a concern over the access, then we've already served 3 notices, and I think we'll have more coming through in the next few weeks, because we can't just jump straight to notice quite often. So the next 2 questions were around Legionella and also the Asbestos Re-Inspections, obviously the ones that have gone red. Red for the first time since I've been here. And I think that in actual fact, I mean, clearly we'd like to be sitting here with all green, but I want to be sitting here, even more importantly, with confidence in the figures that we're presenting to committee and that we're presenting to the regulator. And as I've explained to the regulator, and they've accepted in our last meeting, these were the figures that we took there. They've accepted the journey we're on and are still very supportive, and acknowledging the progress we've made. You can see not only in terms of that percentage compliant, but you'll see a change in the baseline numbers that we're using, which of course impacts in the overall percentage that we've got as a compliant. And there's 2 reasons for that. First of all, a real in-depth dive into our systems and validating the information held in our systems, particularly our asset management system, which is Apex, and also the propeller system that we've talked about here before. The other thing is testing that against the local knowledge of officers and people within the teams. For example, with Legionella, we've seen an additional 8 properties added. The team have asked the question about whether they may contain shared water services, which is what triggers our landlord responsibility. And we've taken, I think quite rightly, a very pessimistic view and said, if we're in doubt, we include it in the figures until we can disprove it. The Legionella tests, as we've indicated in the paper, in the report, have been completed. We are waiting on the paperwork. The other reassurance we've got that in terms of all the contractors and our own colleagues doing inspections and assessments, where they identify a high risk action, they immediately notify us of that so we can take appropriate action. Just working through very quickly, Chairman, with your agreement, gas figures, we've moved on significantly since last month. So we had there 23 non-compliant, that's down to 3. So that will, we hope, at the end of this month, turn green. Electrical, we've touched on. Asbestos re-inspections, we've had those baseline, that baseline figure changing again. The re-inspections we've got there for completion date 10th of June, and we've got the new asbestos surveys ordered. So again, in terms of the reassessment, those will be improved at the end of this month. The fire risk assessments that have gone amber, those are all complete and we're all established. So that will be green if we run the report today. And the lift inspections as well, they're back to 100%. So again, they would be green. Hopefully, Councillor Knowles, that's answered those 3 different questions.
Thank you very much. Any member has any further questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Councillor Knowles. I anticipated the questions, you asked them, and that was really great. I'd just like to go one stage further, though, with tenants' engagement. 2 things. One is I'm currently in communication with Manor Court in Bourne with some of their concerns. We are going to hold a public meeting for all the tenants that are there going to attend on some of the issues, and in particular the ownership for the garden, so they can participate in those again. We are going to hopefully, and this will be very early in May, this meeting, we're hopefully going to use it as a template because we're going to go across the rest of the sheltered housing schemes with the tenant engagement as well. So that's a very good move forward and a very, very positive attitude that I'm now able to use for my housing directorate and its staff, something that I've really struggled with in the past. So I'm really, really delighted to be able to say that. And the second thing is we haven't yet received the Riverside Hsc report. It was updated. I have said that we were expecting an indication the 1st of April. That's still awaited. And I'm only very sorry today that I've missed the 2nd of the Riverside meetings, because obviously my duty is to be here. But I just love being engaged with each of our tenants' communities, because that way we are building a stronger relationship. And as Andrew's alluded to, the percentage survey and returns that we've actually had has been truly amazing. And it must be a reflection that we are listening and we are now doing as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Particularly the shelter scheme. I mean, I've been really impressed with Andrew, your department have engaged with residents on my particular area. So thank you for that. And I look forward to further meetings there as well. Any further questions from members? No?
Yeah, just a quick question for you, Andrew. I know some time ago, I think it was Councillor Reid said that there should be no one of choice homeless unless it's just happened or it's an emergent been made homeless. Is that still the case in the district? I know it was off the back of it was in COVID so much. Just a quick comment on the position now with homeless. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trotter. So yes, I think clearly through COVID we were in the everyone in message from central government, so there was no rough sleeping whatsoever. And as we know, we're fortunate in some ways in South Kesteven to be part of the Change for Links partnership that we host, of course, and manage. And that has numerous successes in terms of rough sleepers and getting people, it's the most visible form of homelessness, isn't it? Getting people off the street. I know there was one particular instance where we had a rough sleeper really close to here who, and it is all credit to the frontline workers we've got who were able to engage with him, build trust. That particular gentleman had no local connection to South Kesteven, so we had no sort of formal legal duty to them as a homeless person. But entirely in the ethos of what we're doing, the support worker was able to engage, to work with them, and they were successfully found them a placement in a foyer, so like a hostel, if you like. And they took that placement, and so far as we know, no news is good news in terms of the outcome there. So yeah, very much that a real drive in terms of homelessness and homelessness prevention. We do still, in terms of more sort of homelessness from settled accommodation, still seeing a large number of presentations from the private rented sector. But again, the team are working really hard in terms of managing that, both in terms of the offers of temporary accommodation and offers in our own stock. And of course, committee will be aware, and we'll be bringing a report to committee in terms of the allocation policy and the way in which we're looking at that as well. So by all means, if the committee would like some more specific numbers, happy to send that through as part of as an update in terms of where we are.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think we're possibly talking about the same gentleman. I've noticed a gentleman flip from Marks and Spencer's to Aldi and back again, and I have spoken to him, and he did say that there was an officer on the case, but you did sort of highlight my thoughts on what the general position is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Reid, you want to comment?
Thank you. Can I ask for a point of information from the director, please? I think very informative, and that is about the future funding of the government's initiative on homelessness. Thank you.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Happy to come in there. And yeah, absolutely. As Councillor Reid says, the latest round of funding in relation to rough sleeper initiatives has been open. We have submitted a bid. The bids are being considered. So we will wait the government's, obviously the government's decision with interest. The sort of informal feedback we've had is that it's a strong application and bid that we've put in. So hopefully we'll have a good news story before very much longer in terms of the outcome of that application.
Thank you. So could I ask you, Andrew, how many rough sleepers do you estimate we have in the district now?
Strangely enough, I was reminded of rough sleepers because on the night of the rough sleeper count, that was the night that there was the firearms incident in Stamford, the Chief Inspector referred to, and I was in Stamford doing the rough sleeping count, and I heard the police helicopters going ahead, and we found out what it was about. So our rough sleeper count, we found one rough sleeper, and that's not just a physical count we do, but that's also relying on information from other agencies. So that is, we can be assured that that is a low figure, partly reflecting the excellent work that Change for Links is doing.
Thank you for that update. So could you please inform the committee, if you found a rough sleeper, where would that person be housed?
The quick answer is that depends on their individual circumstances. And clearly, every rough sleeper has their own story and their own life experience. And that's one of the value about having those frontline officers that can engage with people. There may be issues with alcohol dependency or mental health or family breakup, domestic abuse. So the whole background to it is looking to find accommodation that's sustainable and at the right place for that individual circumstances. So it could be, touched on earlier, an example of a foyer, or it could be if there's domestic abuse involved, for example, a refuge situation would be better. So, or even accommodation in our own stock or in the private rented sector with support. So there's a range of options, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that. If I could draw members' attention to page 19, there are two recommendations. One, that the committee notes the latest compliance position following ongoing meetings with the regulator of social housing, and two, that the committee receives a further update report at its next scheduled meeting. Are we all agreed with that? Just raise your hand if you are. That's good, that's carried. We'll now move on now to agenda item 8. We've had quite a lot of input in this one in the past. There's the Assisted Gardening Scheme report. So Jodie, is she here? Are you going to deal with it, Robert?
I am, Mr. Chairman, if I'm permitted to do so. The paper is an information paper for the Rural OSC to provide an insight into the grounds maintenance specification for the HRA communal land, as well as an overview of the number of tenants currently utilising the assisted garden scheme. The HRA grounds maintenance, a table within 1.3, provides a detailed breakdown of the service to be delivered in the financial year of 22-23, as well as the cost to the HRA of £153,700. As I'm sure committee members are aware, there will be a significant amount of work completed and will be continued to be done to understand the extent of the works that ESK do. The committee will note the relation to the assisted garden scheme. We now have 501 tenants currently using the scheme, and there is a mix of grass cutting only and 114 that have a cost of £7.87 per week. Grass and hedge, we've got 264 at a cost of £9.42 per week. In hedges only, there's 123 at a cost of £1.55 per week. Currently delivered at a flat rate, regardless of the size of garden or hedge. This is something that we are seeking to address in the future, as indeed has happened with the mapping exercise that ESK have done right across the district. Appendix 1 shows the location spread right across the district that currently utilise the scheme. Given the rural nature of our district, long travel times are of course to be expected, but does not impact on the cost of service. And before asking for questions and debate, I'd like to also remember that there is a further projection of this becoming a chargeable service option. It is the tenant's responsibility, not ours, to offer a grounds maintenance facility. And indeed, I'm able to report that our grounds maintenance inspectorate is being improved. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We look forward to questions.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Yes, although it's for noting only, but I'll invite questions to you. My question is, first question is, when do you think you'll have a paper on costings for the scheme? Thank you.
Oh, Craig,
if I can come in on that one, we have the costings per property at present around the assisted garden scheme. We have a recharges policy coming to committee in July of this year, I believe, or June, and then that will then be signed off by cabinet, which will then enable us to levy those charges to the tenants, but that will be probably on a pro rata scheme where we'll build those charges up over the next 2 years from kind of a 50% charge up to 100% charge over a 2-year period. So that's work that's in progress at present. You can see within the report the level of charges that we're looking at around the assisted garden scheme. There is additional work ongoing where we're looking to grade the size of the gardens to like a small, medium, large scenario, so we can be more equitable with the charges even more so moving forwards into the future. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking really at the future then, because many of our residents probably could not afford that amount of money per week. So I would look forward to seeing what your proposed charges might be, and to see whether there's any discount scheme at all for those who can't afford it. Councillor Reid, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chairman. The process is very interesting, that we go from no charge to actually charging. So what will come to Cabinet, and indeed will probably and should come to your committee to scrutinise, is whether, as it's been said, it's over 2 years that this is introduced, or maybe over 3 years, depending on what is actually thought to be appropriate. And so it will be gently introduced. Quite separately, of course, there is, I think I'm right in saying about 41% of the people that their living expenses are assisted by credit, universal credit, etc. And of course, for those people that are particularly vulnerable, they would be covered by that mechanism. But I can see Craig is very keen with his finger on the button there, so I'll hand over to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Craig?
I was just going to provide reassurance that any charges that's going to be levied around the assisted garden scheme and grounds maintenance would be HP eligible. So those most that need and already in receipt of benefits would have that covered too.
That's good. Thank you. The first speaker is Councillor Philip Nobles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 or 3 things. First of all, I would remind the speakers that this meeting unanimously rejected any charge to be made. And one thinks that when inflation's running at God knows what at the moment, and particularly council tenants will be struggling more than ever with paying things, then the idea that we suddenly start introducing more charges would be inappropriate, I would suggest. So whatever the Cabinet suggests, I think it's going against what this committee has already decided upon or recommended. I've got another significant question, which I think on 1.4, it says the cost to the tenant are outlined in the table below in 1.6. I'm right in thinking that there are not costs to the tenant in this current year, they are costs to the council.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, so that's not cost to the tenant, it's cost to the council. The next thing is you'll not be surprised, I'm going back to where I've been since July last year. These are not costs, or they are costs to SKDC, but they are not costs to the overall council because those services are provided by SK Environment. And so I would ask once again to establish what is the average cost of the work that is done per hour. How many hours per cut have been allocated? That will tell us then what the price of that would be. And then we can look at the price that is being charged and find out what charge is being made for overheads and profit to SK Environment, so that we see those figures and we can see if I was buying anything as a business, I would want to know the costs involved of my supplier. And so presumably SKDC know those costs, and I wish them to provide them as I requested last July, but I want it now on these costs. So I want the hours allowed per cut, for instance. I want the average cost per hour for the employees who are doing it, and therefore we can establish the overheads and the profit that's being put onto that before it's being charged to SKDC. And if there's any thought in the future of charging this out, I would have thought it would be absolutely essential that SKDC should make sure they get that work done at the best cost possible, and that would not involve these sort of costs. It's £30 a cut at the moment, and that is not the best possible cut, certainly not in Bourne. If they, they can't give that work to to Bourne Town Council and get those jobs done a lot cheaper. And if the tenants are going to have to pay for it, or even part of it at some stage, we have a duty to get that work done as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. Thank you very much, Chair.
Of course. Craig.
Just to advise council, I'm aware that there's significant work going on from a corporate level around the grounds maintenance contract as a whole. And I know that that is forming part of the specification and part of the tender works and evaluations that are going to be undertaken later on in this year. So that's something that would be forthcoming to this group and also to Cabinet in due course.
So in respect to Councillor Knoll's specific questions, are you able to answer those to him directly?
Well, we went,
If I could come in, Chairman, thank you. Yes, certainly in relation to Councillor Knowles clearly asking about the costs and in that sense the overheads and the if you like the costing structure of ESK. What this paper is doing is presenting it in terms of the HRAs you quite rightly picked up on. So in that sense, the HRA is the customer here. So this is the tenant's rent money that we're spending on these services. So for us, or for for the council making a value judgment about the way in which grounds maintenance and the assisted garden scheme is delivered, these are the current costs to the HRA. I think you're right, and clearly we have a responsibility in terms of best value and all those other sorts of responsibilities that we have, particularly in bearing in mind that this is tenants' money that's being spent on these services, to make sure that that is representing good value for money for the tenant. So I would certainly see that as we're, and Craig has alluded to the fact about the work going on in ESK at present in terms of specification and costings, etc. I think that we will need to be able to demonstrate from the point of view of the regulator in terms of tenant empowerment and the tenant involvement standard that we have tested these costs in a best value way. So that does involve testing the market, and that trade-off, as clearly with your experience in business, about cost and quality, and you get what you pay for, but what is it that you're looking to pay for? So this is very much, I think, a report for committee to show that we've moved on in terms of the information and the detail that we're able to supply from that HRA perspective, that there's work going on in ESK, but this certainly isn't the finished product we've got. We do need to test with those on the assisted garden schemes in terms of the satisfaction. As Craig has mentioned, we've got some large gardens, some medium, some small. We need to think, if we can make that more equitable in terms of not just a flat rate. And just a final sort of point is that local authorities charge tenants for these sorts of services. South Kesteven's the first district council I've worked for out of 5, 6 where they haven't. This is common. This is as the portfolio holder mentioned, the responsibility of garden maintenance is a tenant's responsibility. This is a service that we can offer to tenants, but the costs is that tenant responsibility. And clearly, if a tenant is in a property where they can't manage the garden, it's natural then to think in terms of their ability to manage their tenancy, and whether a move, a downsize, or a move to accommodation that's more suitable for their needs, could be the benefit of both the tenant and us as a landlord in terms of getting the property back to relet. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Andrew. Any further?
Yes, it's helped. It's given some information. I still require the numbers. It's inconceivable that SKDC should accept charges from SK Environment without having the basis of those charges clearly defined. To say that they are still looking into it and they've not finished that exercise yet, well, we shouldn't be accepting any charges if they've not finished with their investigation. we've obviously accepted these charges on a basis, and I want to know the basis that those have been charges have been made up. From SK, if I can't get it from housing, I'll have to go to SK Environment to get it, I suppose. And they'll tell me it's nothing to do with me, it's to do with housing. And if you recall, I was most vociferous, absolutely vociferous, when the chair of the director of SK Environment, I think Environment SK, was the same person as the chair of this committee here. And when I said that was a conflict of interest, I was told it wasn't, when clearly it was, which was recognised eventually by the occupant. So there is a necessity for us to challenge SK Environment for its costs, its real costs, and look at them before we accept any number as an exception for SK, and particularly if we're going to think about passing these costs on. It's wrong.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Knowles. Is that something, Andrew, that you could provide or can provide or able to provide? Councillor Knowles?
Certainly, and I think it's reflected in your question, Councillor Knowles, that we are here as a housing service to present housing figures. In terms of those figures from a company, I think certainly that the council can provide those to members, but maybe not through this route, if that makes sense. I do think in terms of that sort of hourly rate that the ESK charges are coming out at, which is just over £30 an hour, I think, per cut. We did do some soft benchmarking with other districts, and that's just about bang on what other districts are paying for these sorts of services. So I don't have any, other than us naturally looking at improving our services over the course of this year, I don't have any huge concerns in terms of that value for money test at present, but clearly there's more work that needs to be done.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, I took on the role of the outside company for eventually, it was 2 months. It was 2 months of helpfulness in a transition. That's what it was for, nothing more, nothing less. So I'd like that to be noted. The second thing is during my tenure there, I learned that the cost of profit, which is interesting to the committee, on HRA services is 10%. So I hope that, I think I might have said it before, but that is what I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah Trotter.
Yeah, I don't know, Andrew or Craig. Probably a bit of ignorance. I always think that the worst gardens, yes, there are people who are able to do the garden themselves, but there is people who are not willing to do the gardens themselves, even if they can. Is this totally on verbal request and people that aren't able to do the gardens? Or if you see a garden, I know you said look at downsizing. If they're not able to look after the garden, then they should look at downsizing. These gardens are a mess. Is there any way that you have influence over their garden, the assistance garden scheme? Does that make sense? And I apologise for my ignorance, but it's a question I had to ask.
No, thank you, Councillor Trotter, for your question. I think with any scheme of this, this nature, what landlords sort of accept, or the reason for it, is that sort of obvious tenancy breach in terms of an untidy garden or an overgrown garden, and then it, you get brambles through to the neighbours, and I'm sure, preaching to the converted in terms of the inquiries members get, but that triggers all those issues. And a lot of landlords provide some sort of assisted gardener scheme, but with a really quite a tight criteria, in the sense that there's no one able-bodied in the household, for example, or no one that can do the gardening, whether that's through old age or older persons or disability. That there has to be some criteria that's met to become eligible. So it does, and it can help sustain a tenancy in helping people, at the point where they can't cope with the garden anymore, but that they enjoy living in the property and they're able to manage the property. I was just trying earlier to illustrate the point that if there's, it can be an indicator that stuff is going wrong, they may need additional support, and part of that may be a move to more suitable accommodation. And just for a point of clarity, in terms of I think Councillor Reid mentioned obviously the benefit entitlements, and clearly we have a large proportion of tenants that are on income related benefits, including help with housing costs. And clearly tenants can make decisions about what they spend their income on, and it could be that they choose to, assuming that if a scheme becomes chargeable, that they choose to spend and they make a value judgment to spend some of their benefits on that. But there's no direct relationship, or this type of charge isn't directly eligible for housing benefit in the way, for example, a heating charge would be in a communal block of flats where you're on a shared heating system. So slightly technical point, but I just hope that makes it clear for committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to now close the debate and refer you to page 33. There are two recommendations. In fact, there are notes actually. Note the specification to be delivered to the HRA community areas and total costs. And the second note is that numbers utilising the assistant garden scheme. Are we happy with those, supporting those recommendations? Just raise your hand if you are. It's not a formal vote. No. Okay, thank you. So I'm now moving on to item 9, which is the void update. Before I move on, can I just thank Craig Spence for inviting me to your weekly meeting. It's very interesting to hear what you were saying, how you were dealing with the problems, and thank you for that. Are you presenting the report? Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So an update on voids. This provides assurance that the positive progress is being made with the management of void properties within the HRA since the adoption of the voids policy. And I'd like at this point to convey my thanks for the improvements that have been made, because they've been very largely due to the energies of our Assistant Director of Housing. The attendance of the chair of your good self was appreciated at the voids meeting that you mentioned. The new meeting structure is providing an enhanced focus on all teams across the directorate, and that is principally the reason for the improvements. We have improved our performance monitoring, as mentioned, and is highlighted in Appendix 1. This report refreshes on a weekly basis and provides a real insight into the current performance and size of the task in hand. Last year, we completed works and relet 327 void properties, which is at an average of 83 and a half days. But what I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, is we actually turned around one every day for the whole calendar year, excluding bank holidays, which is a significant improvement. We have a comprehensive voids process, which is detailed in Appendix 2. This shows how complex the process is and provides an insight into the work completed on each of our void properties. It highlights the voids process, starts once the outgoing tenant gives the 4 weeks required notice, and includes inspection, works, compliance checks, and a successful sign up for a new tenant. And also, thankfully, now that we're out of the horrid times of COVID, the state that our properties, the amount of rubbish or goods that they don't, household goods that are not taken away, has slightly improved. But at every opportunity, I urge for us all to remind tenants that are departing that they had need of our accommodation when they wanted it, and to leave it in a fair and proper state means we can turn it around for other needy people as quickly as possible. The performance targets for 22-23, in line with the corporate priorities, we'd like to set a stretch target to improve our void times by over 25% to 60 days. This would place us in the top quartile performance bracket utilising the data of 21-22's Housemark. And indeed, I do know some authorities and some performances that can get as low as into the 40s. So we are going along that way. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce the update and look forward to debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Reid. I mean, this is a very good report and very good figures. I'm really pleased to see that the team, which I congratulate for getting the voids increased so we can have more properties let out to our residents. So thank you for that. And please pass on my regards and my best wishes to your team. Thank you. Right, Amanda Wheeler, you're next.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the update. I can't remember when it was, so forgive me, but I know that we reviewed something either at the last meeting or the meeting before about the state in which properties need to be in order to be relet. And I'm sure at the time I questioned about the fact that carpets need to be taken up. And I know that that's been in the news this week. And I'm just wondering, because obviously the taking up of carpets is time consuming, expensive and quite wasteful when you think of our climate emergency. And I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be cheaper and quicker to simply treat carpets, particularly if they're in a good state of repair, just for potential infestation rather than taking them up. Second point was the previous breakdown of voids broke them into major and minor, but we haven't done that this time, and I just wondered why. And also the void rent loss in the last year has doubled, which I appreciate that you're trying to bring the time down, but it seems to be quite a significant increase in terms of the loss. And obviously just, there are a lot of people on the housing register waiting for properties. So the target of 40 would be brilliant to reduce it to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Who wants to? Councillor Craig.
Thank you for your questions. I suppose in relation to carpets within our relet standard and within our inspection regime, we will make exceptions. So if the carpets are in exceptionally good condition, they are of neutral colour, we won't remove them. Predominantly, though, we do look to remove them so we can inspect the condition of the floors underneath. So that's one of the reasons that we have to balance that. But it is something that we do discuss at our weekly board meeting when we've got properties coming in. With regards to the void rent loss, the £174,000 that was reported last year, I think we need to caveat that around our data and the way that we've probably excluded days historically that we aren't doing anymore. And also with the 83.46, I prefer to manage the void days as a one holistic number rather than looking at minor and major and moderate. So that's why we've done that, because that's the way that we're going to do it moving forwards. Realistically, when you look at the fact that we had 162 days for major and 64 for minor last year, and we only had £174,000 of rent loss, even though we did 372 voids, but we did 344, the numbers just don't stack up consistently. So that's why we put the caveat in there around the data quality. What I will commit to is that we will have that consistency and full transparency moving forward from this point in time. And I think that was all of your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further questions from members of the committee? No, if not, I refer you to page 39. Two recommendations on here, both noting again. One, note the year and void turnaround performance of 83.46 days, and note 22-23 void turnaround performance target of 60 days for 22-23. Are we all agreed with recommendations? Yes, all agree. Thank you. We'll now move on to item, if I can find it. We're now on the Jubilee. Jubilee.
Community hall.
Queen's Jubilee. I understand. Separate paper. I think we all got the paper that came through today. I think Carol, no? Alan Robinson, I understand. Alan, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for the late delivery of the report. I wasn't aware of that, Chairman. So I do offer my apologies for that. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a relatively short report on the things that are going on in the district as we mark the Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. You can see in the paper, just to draw your attention to section 1.4, which really concentrates on the kind of planting of trees. That's a thing that's been encouraged by the royal family to plant. I think it's because it rhymes, plant a tree for the Jubilee. So it's a really good soundbite, isn't it? And we're doing that. And you'll see that detailed in there. A number of people locally will be lighting the beacons, as we've seen at previous Jubilees, and significant effects. And in item 1.7, there is a link to the Queen's Jubilee beacons.com, which allows people to understand how that should take place. I know there are a number of communities as listed in the appendices who are doing just that this year to mark such a special occasion. You'll see when it comes out, that SK today is certainly Jubilee themed, as the leader said it would be. And during the year, we've also included in round 25 of the SK Community Fund being open for events such as garden parties, that kind of thing that people wanted to organise as a mark of respect for the Jubilee. As we've done at previous events of this, we really want to encourage communities to A, take part, but B, let us know and we can publicise those, get the comms out, and we want to see those pictures around the day as well. So if we can get some really good pictures of you guys in your communities commemorating this event, that will be really good. The team will be on that and trying to get that out for all our forums at the website, social media of other types, because we really want to get that kind of flavour of how communities are in South Kesteven and how they are celebrating this significant event. So just to take you back to the recommendations, this paper is for noting, so it's to note the activity and the events planned by both ourselves and the community to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and also to offer thanks to all those involved in organising events to celebrate the Jubilee and embracing national pride and the spirit of the South Kesteven communities.
Yeah, thank you. Alan. Any questions for any members? It's for noting only. Councillor Wheeler.
It's not a question, just to say that on the list of things that are happening in Stamford, which is true, but we are actually naughtily planting a tree, because I see at 1.6 planting was advised to take place by March and then resume again in October. So with apologies, we're going to be planting our tree on the day of the activities on the Stamford Recreation Ground on the 2nd of June. So I don't know if we'll get into trouble for acting outside of the approved time slot. But anyway, anyone who hasn't got anything planned is very welcome to come down to Stamford. It's going to be very fun.
Thank you. Councillor Knowles.
Something similar. This is a very small list of things under Bourne that are happening. Bourne has a lot more happening. Bourne Town Council is coordinating all the activities. There's activities at Elshire Park, there are activities at the village of Dyke, which aren't on here. There's a lot more activities in Bourne itself. And if we're going to publish, try and get it in the May version, when is the deadline for that? It's passed, presumably. So it'll be before the Jubilee. So yes, the deadline's passed for those events. So there'll be. So I wasn't asking for things to put in in SK today. What I was suggesting was there is a special commemorative kind of one with pictures of the Queen's visits to South Kesteven over the past. What we really want from you is those really good images and those things that are happening in Bourne and other places. We'll get those out on social media, and there'll be really good things to use in our next edition as well. So we really do want to get those really good community shots out there on all our streams, and to really celebrate the day. That the team will be waiting for those coming in, Councillor Knowles. So I look forward to seeing those, and I'm sure you can plant a tree whenever you want in Stamford. Although don't hold me to it. Chair, can I just respond to that? Can I ask, you said when you were speaking that you want to see our mugs on pictures and so on and so forth. Can I suggest that it's not our mugs that's on pictures, it's the public? We're sick of seeing the same mugs on SK Today and everything else. The same mugs appear every
Faces,
single
you-
month.
You mean faces?
Faces, yeah, sorry, faces. It's a Lancashire term, sir. But any of the same faces appearing on the pictures of everything to show how wonderful we all are, when it shouldn't be us. This is a jubilee for the Queen, and it is the public who are celebrating, so on. And we should be celebrating the public and not SKDC or town councillors or anything of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Reid, I note on page 5, you've got down here, all parish and town councils have been contacted. What about the Grantham Charter Trustees? You've got those?
I'm sure they have, but I couldn't say for definite, Chairman. Sorry. I can check those details. You will probably know better than me.
And also in Grantham, as chairman of the Grantham Almshouses Committee, we have a special afternoon tea on the 2nd of June as well, which you haven't got there.
Chairman, if I could, this list was never going to be comprehensive. All these things are going on all over the place. Obviously the language I used was inappropriate for Councillor Knowles. I didn't mean you, literally you, although, you know, not that that'd be a problem. We're happy to put you on our social media pages. It's about the communities doing those things, isn't it? You represent the communities, and I think we want to see our communities being celebrated and celebrating this landmark day. That's the idea. It's not about promoting the council, it's about promoting the place and the places that are within it. And that's what we'll try to do.
And next speaker is Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. Well, to follow on from Councillor Knowles' Bourne Events Group, I'm one of the events group. It's not the purpose of asking to speak. The purpose of asking to speak is what we did at Bourne Down Council, was to evaluate that we wanted to make sure that the events of the whole 4-day period were coordinated, and we felt that we could offer that as a service. So we didn't end up with 2 events or 2 celebrations taking on the same time. So actually, I'm a bit annoyed at this Appendix 1 because it's not accurate. It doesn't really do what it's just an outline. We've learned that we can't actually get something in SK today as an update. So could I suggest that for our members of our district, perhaps we could get something on the website nearer the time that is accurate, like for Bourne, it includes Elsie Park. I mean, amongst other things, there's a parade that we're doing on the Sunday, that's not there, and where it's going to be. So we need what the public need, and what as a conduit between the public and the district council I require, is an accurate itinerary of all of our villages and of our districts. Because as the invitation has come from Amanda Wheeler to go to Stamford, well, I might like to do that, but I have to work out where I can be in Bourne and when I have time, just like every other member of the public. And indeed, they might want to come to Grantham, or they might want to do other things. So the purpose of this should be that it actually is a timetable so that people can use it as a service and it can be of a benefit of our community. This is a waste of paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Reid. Your comments are noted. I'm going to go now to Councillor Sarah Trotter.
Yes. Councillor Reid, it does say snapshot, and I appreciate your comments, but as a rural district councillor, and as I mentioned earlier, with quite a number of parish councils and dealing with the community, is very much an ongoing programme. I think we are getting to the point, certainly a snapshot of my area, ward. They are producing programmes that I'm taking part of delivering. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Everyone is coming together. And from my own example, they're bringing together the vulnerable, the elderly. I know Carol from Community Awards has been asked for lots of small grants. She's been working tirelessly. There's been lots of other grants that have been approached as well to fund these community, and I just think it's really special time. Everyone's making a real effort, and I'm not disappointed at all. And it is ongoing. There's so much going on. It's amazing, really. So yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone who's probably not in this room, but also it is a snapshot, this piece of paper, and it's ongoing, I think, isn't it? Work in progress, I think the word is. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm going to refer you now to page 3. The two recommendations are: 1, notes the activity and events planned by both the South Kesteven District Council and the community to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. 2, to thank all those involved in organising events to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, embracing national pride and the spirit of South Kesteven communities. Are we all happy with that? Please raise your hand. Yes, all carried. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to call for a 10-minute comfort break. So be back at 10 minutes if you can. Right, welcome back. We're on agenda item 11, the Community Awards Grant 2021-2022. And I understand Carol will present the report. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just say the title is a little bit misleading because it's got nothing to do with the grant. It's the Community Awards.
I do apologise.
No. That's what it says in the actual document, but it's actually the SK Community Awards. These slides that I'm going to share with you have been put together to provide feedback to the wider committee from a working group that met on the 2nd of March to discuss some of the lessons learned from the 2021 Community Awards, and just to give you a flavour of the 2022 awards, if that's okay with you. Thanks, Jordan. Jordan's going to move the presentation on for me. So I don't need that one. Thanks very much. So some of the lessons learned. We started to plan very early, and because of that, obviously, we got a very smooth process in terms of developing what the categories were going to be, launching it appropriately within Volunteer Week. We were able to put together a dedicated page on the SKDC website with a very prominent banner on the landing page of SKDC's website with a link to the nomination form. We had an online nomination form. We must consider, obviously, that when we were doing this, there were still quite a lot of restrictions in place in terms of meeting people or being in person. So a lot of this was quite electronic. However, we did provide hard copies of the nomination form when they were asked for. That in itself met with the requirements of the people that got in touch with us. We had clear criteria, we felt, for eligibility of the nominees. So who could be nominated and for what? A 6-week nomination period. We agreed a criteria for the judging of the nominations, and we had some really good interaction through our communications team with the winners and some very positive PR. So that's the things that went well. Some of the things that we wanted to consider, we ought to consider. So in any other terms, I would say things that what would be considered in terms of from where a nomination came from. All nominees must have operated within SKDC. They didn't have to live within SKDC, so long as they provided services within our district for the benefit of our residents. Elected members weren't allowed to judge a group that they were connected to or have a personal interest in. Nominations couldn't be for individuals or groups or businesses that operated for personal gain. The exception to that, of course, were because we did have a business in the community category. And so companies that had very strong corporate social responsibility agenda were definitely people that we wanted to be nominated within that category. And we asked our judges to look for what made those nominees stand out. Now, a lot of that was really dependent on the information that the nominator provided to us. People were asked to provide us with up to 200 words to support their nomination. Some people gave us 200 words, some people gave us more than 200 words. Some people gave us very little. And obviously then you're working with only the information that's provided by the nominator. Thanks, Jordan. What wouldn't have been considered, and all of these things will remain for 2022, we would not take nominations in support of a lobbying group. We wouldn't take nominations that in support of a political party or political group. Nominations for elected members at any level of local government would be accepted if the nomination was made in support of the community effort of that individual. We wouldn't accept nominations that related to religious activity. Again, nominations would be accepted for non-religious community action and activities open to all that are provided by many of the faith groups that do incredible community work across our district. And we wouldn't accept nominations relating to individuals or groups that didn't operate within South Kesteven and for the benefit of those within our district. Thanks, John. So our lessons learned, our areas for improvement. The non-electronic nomination process. So when people asked us for a form, proved to be a little bit clunky, and it proved to be a bit clunky because we weren't here, we weren't in the offices, and so if people wrote in and asked us for it, there could be quite a time delay between us getting that request and being able to provide. And similarly, when nomination forms came back, so it wasn't as quick. They all happened within the time scale. There wasn't anything that we missed, but it didn't run as smoothly as it would have done if we'd have been in the offices 5 days a week. Councillor Knowles may like this particular one. Some of the publicity featured SKDC more than the individuals nominated, and we weren't happy with that, and neither were the public. And quite rightly, these are community awards. These are about our communities. They're about the people that are out there every single day doing brilliant things, and they featured perhaps less than we did. Too many of our categories had very similar themes, and this gave us issues with people nominated people within the wrong category. So we had to do a bit of manipulation around the categories because actually to give people the best opportunity to be awarded, everybody got a certificate of acknowledgement to say, regardless, to say what you're doing is brilliant and thanks ever so much. But to give people the absolute best opportunity, they needed to be in the right category for the work that they did. One of our major issues when it came to judging was that our categories for 2021 were chosen to match our cabinet portfolios. And the reason that it gave us an issue is that the judging down to finalists and winners was done by the specific portfolio holder and an officer for each category. So on one of the categories, one of our cabinet members came back to us and said, I can't judge this category. I know 3 of the people that are in, so we moved it around and we swapped a cabinet member judging one category for a cabinet member judging another category. And then that cabinet member said, I know these people. So we had to get the chairman involved. And I'll come on to it when I talk about the 2022 awards, but that was one of the things that really, out of all of it, was the biggest headache, was the fact that people had interest and rightly pointed out the fact that they had interest and actually could be seen to be biased. And so we had to move things around. The certificates of acknowledgement were sent out really early. They were sent out before we got the trophies out to the winners. And again, all of this had to be done remotely. We had to go out and we posted the certificates, and then our comms team went out and met with all of the winners to present the trophies. But because the certificates went out early, people put things on social media, and then it kind of it distracted from the winners in some ways. And one of the other things was we absolutely recognised that we couldn't do this in 2021 because of the restrictions that were on us. But we need more outlets for the promotion of the awards to include what I've called in this underreached communities. And so they may be communities whose first language isn't English, perhaps people who don't have access to technology, etc. So we need to look at finding more outlets for publicity of these awards, because we'd like the most nominations that we could possibly get. Oh, sorry, I've just pressed my button to make it go and it doesn't. I thought you'd like to see our some of the pictures of our winners. So the two in the middle are the special awards. So we had categories, and then we had two special awards. We had Volunteer of the Year and we had Community Group of the Year. And the Volunteer of the Year was a man called Baz Watcher. You can see him in the top picture in the middle. And he did lots of stuff through COVID to promote physical health and well-being, which helped a lot of people with their mental health issues. And our Community Group of the Year, you can see in the bottom picture in the middle, and that is Art Pop-Up from Stamford, who adapted a project that was actually funded through the SK Community Fund, so that because as it came in originally, it wouldn't have been able to be delivered in that manner. So they adapted it to enable people to still participate in that project during COVID. So the top left is our inspirational young person. It goes back to the thing that Chief Inspector Vickers was saying, not all young people do negative things. We had loads of nominations of incredible young people doing incredible things. So that's Abby Jane Walster. Below her, you can see more of the Lives First Responder vehicle than you can of the Lives First Responder. But that's Ella Tapson, and she's pictured with Candice Smith and Tommy Smith. And that category was the Neil Smith Beyond the Call of Duty category, named after our former colleague. The bottom is our Helping Hand category, and that's Ria Rayside from Second Helpings in Stamford. Top right are Nicola and Don Brister from Don't Lose Hope in Bourne. Below them is George Dunn, who is the 8-year-old litter picker, who won our Cleaner and Greener. We didn't know he was 8 at the time. Our Cleaner and Greener category. Below him, we go from one extreme to the other. This is our Lifetime Achiever, Stephen Hullett. And in the bottom corner, that's our Business in the Community winner. I've just forgotten his name, which is really bad. It's Jason, sorry, and I know him as well, that's really bad. Jason Price from Jason Price Funeral Directors, who does an incredible amount of work in the community and to support the community. Thanks, John. So, and you can go again, thanks. So going on this year, we've changed the categories slightly. So we'll still have a Business in the Community award. We'll still have an Inspirational Young Person award, nominees for people up to the age of 25. This is a new one, Best Schools Green Project. And this is one that we hope will raise awareness around environmental issues and climate change and all of those kinds of things. And we're looking for nominations from schools that are doing schools projects to promote this agenda. Helping Hand has been changed to Good Neighbour. We still have a Lifetime Community Champion. Health and wellbeing can be anything from physical health and wellbeing to mental health and wellbeing. And we will, of course, still have our Neil Smith Beyond the Call of Duty. So the Neil Smith Beyond the Call of Duty category is the one really for blue light services. It's for people that have saved someone's life. Neil saved his son Tommy's life when he was Tommy was only 14 months old, had a heart attack or cardiac arrest. And Neil sadly has passed away himself. So we wanted to remember him in this manner. Thanks, Jordan. So we've already got some planning underway for 2022. We will have an event this year, which is brilliant. We obviously couldn't do that last year. We did end up going all around the district taking photographs of people, but we will have an event this year. It's booked for the 21st of October. We are again going to launch the awards during Volunteers Week. We are aware, obviously, that Volunteers Week is always the 1st to the 7th of June. We are incredibly aware that the week of the 1st to the 7th of June is also the same time that the Queen's Platinum Jubilee is. So we'll do more publicity before and after. The webpage is ready to go. We've changed the categories within the nomination forms. We have got fewer categories, and we have made the criteria, what goes in the background for the criteria of all of those things. We've made that, we hope, a little clearer for people that are nominating people. We'll have a 6-week nomination period, and this time judging will be with a panel of judges rather than 2 judges per category. And we're looking at the possible involvement of previous winners to be on that panel, potentially going forward to help us determine who should win. All the winners will be presented with crystal trophies, and that will happen at the event ceremony. It will be determined who gets invited to the event ceremony when we find out how many nominations we get. Last time we got 123 nominations. That they weren't 123 individuals, that was 123 nominations. Some people were nominated multiple times. But obviously if you're going to come to an event, you want to bring people with you. So we have the capacity of the Guildhall Ballroom, and the idea is that each year that we do this, we'll move the event around the district. If anyone wants to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Carol. Before I open up to questions, you mentioned hard to reach. I mean, that's one thing that came to my mind when I saw the photographs. Did people from different backgrounds not come forward, or they just weren't aware of your scheme? How did you, obviously did, how did they, none of them get into this photograph or as winners?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The truth of it is we can only work with the nominees that were given by the public, and yet the information did go out. Obviously, there's always more that you can do. We were restricted because of the conditions last year, so we can do more this year. But again, it will be absolutely dependent on the public. So, you know, as members are out and about within their own electoral wards or attending parish and town councils, everybody knows somebody, don't they, that does something brilliant and probably didn't get nominated. And that's the thing, is we can pick from what we get. So I can't answer the question on whether we got any nominations from people from ethnic minority communities, but whether that's because it didn't get to them, I don't know. We don't know.
I was just thinking of the Jubilee Church. I mean, a number of different languages and religions we got there. So I just can't understand why we didn't get any, unless we did and they weren't chosen.
We did quite a lot of direct work with Jubilee around the time, because of not only because of the work that they do, but also because they are recipients of quite a lot of support from local business that could have been nominated because of the stuff that they do around their corporate social responsibility, and also from the people that they work with. So we did do that. But it's people's choice whether they nominate people or not.
Right, thank you. The first speaker I've got is Councillor Amanda Wheeler. Amanda.
Thank you, Chairman. And thanks, Carol. I absolutely love the community awards. I think they're a fantastic thing, and I'm really glad that we're going to keep going with them. I absolutely agree. The publicity should be all about the people and nothing to do with anyone at SK. I think that's a really huge thing, so I'm glad that's been recognised. I also love the idea of involving schools, and I think involving schools will also help with reaching harder communities as well, because all communities have, well, pretty much most communities have children who mostly attend school. So I think if you're going out with a school category, it would be just as well to publicise the wider awards within the school. I also love the fact that you've got an environmental project. I'm just wondering whether you need to merge the two into best school environmental project. It seems a bit prescriptive. It may be that a school project that they've come up with is something to do with mental well-being, mindfulness, and nothing to do with environmental. And I wonder if it's too late to propose that you separate that project out into two. So you have a best school project, which may or may not be environmental. That could just be what they're doing. They might be doing a learn and reading buddy scheme or something, and then have a separate category, which is environmental project, which could be open to schools as well. So they have two bites of the cherry. Personally, that would be my way of improving it. And also using last year's winners on the panel, I think is an absolutely brilliant idea. And if you have, or because they missed the opportunity to have a celebratory occasion, if you were managing to get all of last year's winners together as part of the panel, could you turn that into a late celebration for last year's winners, so they have a celebratory lunch or something, and at that lunch they then decide the winners for this year? Thank you.
All of the winners were actually invited to the chairman's lunch. The winners from last year were invited to the chairman's lunch because we couldn't do an event. But by the time the chairman's lunch came around, the winners that were shown up there were all invited to that. So they did. They've had a. We've given them lunch. And of course, there's nothing to stop us from inviting last year's winners to this year's event.
Members, I'm conscious of time. We've got one more item after this. Are we happy to continue for another 20 minutes or? We all agreed? Good, good. Any more questions from the members? Amanda.
Sorry, just the other point about separating the Best Schools Environmental Project out into two awards. Is that something that could be considered?
I can look at it, but I can't guarantee that we can break it down, because that's another, that would be another award category. It will depend on how far along SK today is at this moment as to whether there's nothing to say we can't do it next year. I'd like to change things every year, but it's environment.
Councillor Trotter.
Hi, Carol. I know we discussed about the judging, didn't we, in March? So obviously it says trying to get involvement and previous winners. How have we finally decided to get the judging panel?
So the panel will be a combination of elected members, officers, and we will invite previous winners. Maybe not one of them, because he's 8. We're also seeking sponsors. So if we get a sponsor or more than one sponsor, they may sponsor a category, and if they do, then they will also be invited onto the panel.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hilary Restrop.
Just wondering whether it's possible to have a runners-up certificate, because people like to have things that they can put on the wall afterwards. Sorry, everyone, did they not get a runners-up certificate?
They did. Yeah, no, they didn't. The finalists didn't get a finalists, as it were, certificate. They all got a certificate of acknowledgement. But we can, yeah, absolutely, we can do that for the final 3, as it were. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? No. I refer you to page 49 then. There's 3 recommendations. 1, present feedback from the working group on 2021 SK Community Awards and share information on the lessons learned. We've heard that. 2, allow members to consider whether there are further actions required in relation to the plans for SK Community Awards 2022 and accompanying celebratory events. We've had some comments back on that. And 3, enable members to request routine progress updates for future committee dates. Are we able to do that, Carol? Are we all agreed on those recommendations? That's good.
Yeah, just with the, I don't know if anyone agrees with me about having the extra one for an environmental and a separate school one. If it's not too late in the planning, whether that could be looked into. Is that something that everyone else
I
agrees
think
with?
that's a good idea. I think if we, yeah, are we all agreed on that one?
Do you,
Yes,
how do you
yeah.
feel about just having another bite of the cherry? Yeah,
Yeah,
is that,
yeah.
do you agree?
Yeah,
If it's not too
okay.
late, Carol, and not too hard work for you.
Good, that's carried then, thank you. We move now. Last item on the agenda, agenda item 12, which you will find on page 63, the SK Community Fund. Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report asks the committee to make a recommendation to Cabinet to amend the criteria of the small grant scheme of the Community Fund. The small grant scheme was introduced a year after the creation of the Community Fund with the very specific purpose of supporting small, perhaps newly formed groups to gain some seed funding for the work that they were doing within the community at grassroots level. These groups needed a simple process to access small amounts of funding that aren't necessarily available to them through other funding streams. In this scheme, groups can apply for 100% of project funding up to a maximum of £2,000. The reason for the request to change the criteria is that although intended for the purpose I just outlined, the scheme is being increasingly utilised by groups and organisations that have considerable financial resources at their disposal. Changing the criteria of the small grant scheme to exclude those who are able to provide match funding wouldn't make them ineligible to apply for larger community projects or events funding stream of the SK Community Fund, through which groups can apply for up to 80% of the project costs to a maximum of £5,000. In this fund, groups are, however, required to provide a minimum of 20% of project funding themselves. So the request is to change the eligibility so that groups that hold financial resources of £10,000 and above will become ineligible to apply to the small grant scheme element of the SK Community Fund. The other change to the criteria we're seeking a recommendation to Cabinet on is to reduce the minimum grant within the small grant scheme from £500 to £200. This change is requested in response to the removal this year of the ward member grant scheme in an effort to minimise the impact on really small groups by opening up this alternative source of funding.
Carol, I've noticed, and I would say this, that quite a few parish councils apply for a grant, even though they can preset themselves for their own projects, their own ideas. So I think it would be right to change it. But I'm going to open up to comments from the committee now. So Councillor Wheeler, sorry.
Just, I think this is a really sensible recommendation and I fully support it.
Thank you. Councillor Trotter.
Yeah, I echo what Councillor Wheeler said. It definitely, and I would like to propose it because I've sat along with the chairman on these community grant boards, and very often, obviously, we get to look at the finances, and you question when you see that someone's organisation's got a huge amount, over £10,000, and you think, why are they asking for a small grant when you've got these, let's say, these small community grants, communities that have only not got much money at all, but they're putting as much as they can, but they haven't got any sat in the bank. So I think it was a bit biased, not biased from us choosing the grant, but it put it on an unlevel playing field, whereas I think this is definitely a fairer system. And yes, and also agree that, let's ask, you can ask for £200 because we've lost the ward grant now. So I think it needs changing, and it's 100%, I support it. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? No. Right, we've only got one recommendation in front of me, which reads, get my tongue going right, recommends to the Cabinet the changes to the eligibility criteria for the small grant scheme of the SK Community Fund. I propose that we accept that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wheeler. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And then the last item on the agenda is for noting only, which is the Future Work Fund. If you've got anything you want to add to it or see differently on there, please contact me and let me know. At that point, at 5:10.